Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Vulnerable. Today we have Gary Comer. We're going to let Gary introduce himself. Pretty excited about this. I think we're going to talk about CWD, EHD. We're going to talk about, what Gary has acquired a wealth of information over the last 30 years, right? I think before then, it's kind of exciting that we dropped our first two episodes. So if you're watching this and you haven't watched them, go watch it. But we acquired, I think, a little over 2,000 views on our first video. We then released a video real quick, and it didn't do as well. And Drew, a friend of mine, kind of told me that you have to do a systematic way of doing it. It's almost like, like people asking you, like, when you're going to do it. You want to give them a schedule so they look forward to it. And in the beginning, I was like, I'm going to do 5 videos so they get to know us, and then I kind of retracted on that.
Lots of people have been texting me, when's the next one? When's the next one?
Yeah. So we're going to do shorts. We're going to do short videos on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, in between the 6 days in between episodes. 7th day we'll drop an episode. I haven't determined that day yet, but we will get there. So, Gary, hi.
Hi. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
You called me up, a couple months ago.
Yep.
Went and visited with you and your grandpa, which, I've known him, I guess, all my life.
Had we even started at that first meeting?
Age over inches.
Yeah, it was.
I think we were just.
Yes, it was age. It was age over inches. We had just done like an episode or two of that. We only did 2, but
yeah, your grandpa called me up one day and said, "Hey, I want to know about CWD. I got a sick-looking deer behind the shop back here." And then, I went and talked to him about that, and then you called me and said, "Hey, I want to know a little bit about this." And so I said, "Sure." It's a good excuse to go visit and talk about a little stuff I know.
Why don't you do some background on yourself?
Well, I'm born and raised here in Logan County. Grew up with Joel. We went to school together. He started a year ahead of me. I graduated a year behind him.
We lived 200 yards apart, 300 yards apart?
Maybe a little further. I'd walk across the property to his house, vice versa. Hunted, fished, got into lots of other kind of trouble when we were kids. Joel
shot him with a BB gun?
Yeah. Joel's mom and my dad were both passed, grew up across the street from each other as well.
They were like best friends growing up.
Yeah. And so, we got into lots of stuff.
I'm gonna make a quick adjustment. Sorry, Gary. Go ahead.
Was never competitive or anything as far as sports and stuff like that goes. Joel's dad coached some of my baseball teams, which I had to usually hit what was a in the park home run for me to get to first base without getting thrown out.
Dude, we won championships. Did we win championships?
We did.
Yeah.
So, a lot of pinch runners, but I got put to the plate quite a bit, at least up to the pony, through the pony league to wield the stick. But I can remember.
I'll have to ask my dad about all
ball
games.
It's like Babe Ruth Jr. over here.
I can remember Paul going, "Come on, Gary Lee, come on, go," and just shaking his head like this and smiling. Okay, then he'd point to the bench, and some small fast kid would come out and take my spot.
Pinch run.
Yeah.
That's great.
But that's okay. Yeah. So, I guess got involved in, hunting and fishing as a kid just because Dad was taking me. He took both of us actually quite a bit.
He did. Yep.
And I wanted to go on to college and learn wildlife management as a science and a vocation. And so I started off at Hocking College here in Ohio. Got a 2-year associate's degree in recreation and wildlife management. Went to Ohio State for some leveling classes, then ended up at Arkansas Tech University in Russellville, Arkansas, and got my dual bachelor's degrees in fisheries biology and wildlife management.
Wow.
And from there went on to graduate school in Lubbock, Texas, Texas Tech. Go Red Raiders, and politically incorrect. I'm going to put my guns up. Yeah, exactly. But got a master's and MS in range and wildlife science. So did research on wetlands at the time. As I came back to Ohio looking for work, I ended up in the Extension Education Service. Did a lot of natural resources work, water quality planning, watershed management. Ended up on Lake Erie for a couple of years, working up there with marina industry. Then ended up Back at another state agency, if I was going to be, what's Gary's subject expertise or what does he know most about, it would be human-wildlife interactions, or in some cases it would be called conflict, so damage management. But really,
Does that mean like how a human interacts with the wild? What'd you say?
yeah, human and wildlife interactions. So, one of the things I spend a lot of my time on right now is urban deer management, which is really more about managing people than it is the deer.
Right.
I remember you telling me about a coyote last year or whatever.
Yeah. Coyotes, folks don't realize how much wildlife lives in
the
urban,
cities.
ex-urban areas or even in cities. Chicago, there's 30-some plus years of research by an OSU researcher. Coyotes live right downtown Chicago. Their primary feed is, rodents, rabbits, and fawns. Now,
Right downtown.
right downtown, the airport there, flying off, any green space, things like that. Deer populations are booming there as well.
Where are there little chunks of woods? I mean, where are they living? Where are they denning?
They'll have puppies in parking garages.
Really?
Walk right up and down the sidewalks.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
I mean,
They're very adaptive. I mean,
the incident he told me about last year was like a coyote attack in a very urban area.
yeah. So that's kind of probably what I get recognized as, but really I would say, jack of all trades, master of none, dealing with the social factors, the sociology of sportsmen, landowners, hunters, if you will, and even the non-hunting public, explaining, things, what's what, why is it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Them are the people that want the answers the most.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. You get a call from a suburban housewife, and sometimes they'll be whispering on the phone. There's a deer in my yard, and I'm like, okay, something wrong with it? Is it sick? No, it's in my yard, and I'll start whispering back like,
What are you gonna do?
like
about
you're
it?
there with her.
like the deer can hear me across 2 counties or whatever. But folks just aren't used to seeing it, and they don't realize that they want to be there because all the food and resources are there. Generally, no hunting and no predation. So why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
The way we develop our land use with pockets of green space, corridors, everybody wants a privacy fence, a hedgerow, perfect edge, which, as you guys know, whitetails orient to edge.
They can adapt and thrive about anywhere. That's for sure.
They're an edge species.
They are an edge species.
There's more white-tailed deer now than when North America was settled by Europeans.
Really?
More deer.
Do you know the numbers on that roughly? I mean,
No, I can't really.
is it twice as many? Is it?
Oh, it's probably exponentially because the whitetail populations were, they weren't expanded west. I mean, we have them now in like Wyoming and places like that. That
Were
was
they
new.
here originally?
They were in the eastern. That's why they got their scientific name, the Virginia whitetail.
Got it. Yeah,
So as the forest, heavy, deep, thick forest, mature timber, old growth trees, that's not habitat for white-tailed deer. They were on the plains, the edge areas, and as agricultural development started happening, the expansion of the white-tailed deer started spreading as well.
So when did deer hit Ohio? I mean, what was the official date?
Talking about
Yeah,
go
Ohio
ahead. No,
became
you're
a,
good.
talking about our parents and everything.
Right.
My mom had newspaper articles that she would show me, and it was like in the late 60s or 68 or 60, and in the newspaper article it said Janice Madden saw a deer today
yeah.
Oh.
So even before that, I think
in the 60s.
The first modern gun season in Ohio was, I think, it was just in southern Ohio.
In the 70s?
The 50s. I think first statewide gun season was like 1950 something.
So they were in statewide?
Yeah. So there was,
Didn't know
I'd
that.
have to get the history books out, but I think Benton County and a few southern, they were pretty much extirpated and reintroduced out of West Virginia and some other places. And it was like 2 or 3 day buck only season, and they only harvested a couple dozen deer in 3-county area.
This is maybe a stupid question, but they naturally introduced themselves to Ohio. We didn't bring them into Ohio,
Yeah.
right?
Was there like Wisconsin deer transplanted or anything?
No, they kind of reintroduced back. There may have been some translocation, similar to like elk programs, but I'd hate to.
Yeah, guess on that.
I can find that answer out, and we can edit that in sometime.
Right. Yeah.
No, that's good.
But
So once again, I guess prevalently known deer. It sounds like they were statewide. You said I think in the 50s, but they maybe didn't start to be known like till the late 60s, and the first gun season was in the early 70s.
what I can remember, I got one of the first antlerless tags that were, it was a lottery. It was, you filled out an application, you got a postcard in the mail, and I killed out there on the Mayan River. I shot my first deer. It was 1979. It was a button buck, and that's kind of where it started. And it was the only deer I'd ever seen in my entire life.
Smith.
Yeah, it was on the river just outside DeGraff.
Yeah. River.
Joel and I both hunted, trapped there, fished there, got dropped off on Friday nights, cooked chicken livers on the lantern while we were catfishing, stuff like that.
Bringing up memories.
We would have catfish bait, and if the fish aren't biting, you end up just cooking your catfish bait. we would be eating chicken gizzards.
That's awesome.
And I didn't miss many meals back in those days.
Carrie's like, screw this fish, and we're just cooking.
So by the time Mom or Dad picked us up on Sunday, I was kind of ready to go home and eat.
Yeah.
But
So
that was good times.
Yeah.
Right there.
So what was the first year you killed a deer?
So if I graduated in 85, and if I may have been, I'm going to say maybe 80.
Okay.
81, yeah.
So 80 or 79,
times.
80, 81.
Somewhere around similar times.
So when you guys went out in the woods, here's a good question. When you went out in the woods at that time and you sat, what was your chances of even seeing a deer at that time? Did you see deer?
I went through several gun seasons, never saw a deer. Saw a deer track, would be excited. Joel was with me when I killed my first buck.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, we were hunting together that day.
Yep.
Everybody remembers, and it was nothing special.
Dude, behind your house was loaded with quail and pheasants.
Yeah.
Loaded.
Killed lots of wild birds. Primarily that's what I was, a bird hunter. The thousands of hours I spent with your dad or your grandfather, I should say, was duck hunting, hunt testing, field trials, training dogs, that kind of thing. But I don't know. We killed a lot of deer in that bottom behind Dad's house.
So what happens?
Both of us, as well as my dad.
Yep.
So what happens to the population from 1980 to now it's 2025? How does the population get so? Is it out of control? That's just.
I felt it was kind of booming 85 through 89, wasn't it?
Yeah,
we had good.
So what Joel and I first started out with, and even more so for our parents and grandparents, there were enough deer to support a recreational deer hunting. It was enjoyed by all. We were excited enough to keep going. Then we got really kind of spoiled.
People didn't bow hunt.
No.
Did people bow hunt?
No,
then?
the gun hunting was
gun
the
hunting.
number one management tool.
Yeah. Everybody got together.
There was
drives.
There was some bow hunting, some crossbow hunters. Chuck Longbreak. He was like a local legend for us.
Yeah.
One of the original crossbows, sat in his little shack,
With his
smoking
pipe.
a pipe,
Yeah.
and killed monsters.
Yeah.
That's cool.
He had them hanging in his little old gas station downtown.
That's awesome.
And I can remember going there just to look at the deer.
What downtown?
Right across from the creamery.
Right across from the creamery.
That's where that was his gas
It's the
station.
highest station.
Oh, Chuck's. Oh, Chuck's old place.
Chuck's place,
Yeah.
old place right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
Longbreak's
Yeah.
gas station.
He rented that building from Chuck's
dad.
Yeah.
father.
Parents.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
that's
there were
cool.
I just remember big deer hanging in
And
that place.
Chuck Longbreak hunted just across from the Smiths on the pool property.
Yep.
So, when you say big deer, these were big deer, like big deer.
I just thought like maybe 180. You agree?
Yeah,
Like Boone and Crockett deer.
Booners are
What?
close. 150s for sure. I don't think. 150s and up.
I don't know.
Nice.
So-
as a kid.
Everything's
you're-
bigger.
Everything.
Everything's bigger.
I guess I'm trying to. Well, it makes sense if you have deer in Ohio and you have a limited amount of people hunting. You're gonna have big deer. You're gonna have big growth. You're gonna have lots
There's
of
no trail cameras.
Right.
Nobody
You
knew
didn't
it.
know what was out there.
Right.
Densities were definitely lower. but
densities,
the deer
like the
densities.
population.
And probably less people too, less housing. It was more, the corn forests were still there.
Like people hadn't
yeah,
sold off their road frontage
Right.
for houses and stuff
right.
yet.
There
you
was
know.
still some fence rows,
Yeah.
some wood lots. Like I said, the corn forest gets harvested every year, and of course that would change deer patterns and behavior.
Oh, just to bring up something that I've never seen in my entire life. I was at my dad's, and the Dixon's fields were being combined today.
Yeah, I don't know what
I've never seen a combine running in June.
because they
They're
left it.
combining the fields.
They left like 500 acres, and I don't know why
Yeah.
they did that. It must have flooded or something. I'm guessing.
Yeah, I don't know.
And then I think they had to combine it because if not, they're going to have refuge corn or whatever they use that term.
Now,
So-
now when you see standing corn, it's done on purpose to
Yeah.
hunt deer in.
yeah, I didn't know. That's a lot of standing corn.
I mean, I saw a semi sitting there just a little bit ago full of corn. Like they
Yeah.
put it in the semi.
I don't know what they're going
I
to do
mean,
with that corn.
that's what my friend said. They might as well dig a hole and bury it because
Yeah.
it probably isn't worth
I
nothing.
think they're literally just trying to get it out of the field
So it don't grow succotash.
so they can work the ground and replant. But I think it flooded.
Yeah.
No,
That's
it didn't.
interesting.
It was dry last year.
Yeah, we had.
I don't know
we
why
had a
they did
drought.
that.
We've had 2 wet springs, obviously, in a row. I'm hoping we get
you
moderate
feel it's going to
rainfall.
get it's going to get dry again?
I don't know. I hope not.
Until
I don't want to
nothing
jinx
good
it,
happens
jinx
with-
it
yeah.
for our farmer friends. The timing, rain in August is really important for yields.
That's it. Rain in
So,
August.
I'd like to feel like we probably got enough to get us well into July right now, but with rain here and there. But
Yeah.
that August rain is what puts
Say the
yields.
2-week forecast got rain in it.
Rain again for
Yeah.
end of the week.
Yeah.
So what happens when you have a deer population? You have probably more edges, more woodses, more woods. You have that kind of ability or that kind of hunting in 1985, let's say, versus now. What does that do to the health of the deer and the population of the deer? What are the negatives of 1985 versus 2025?
Well, like Joel said, we didn't really have the cameras, the way to track what was actually out there. But, in principles of wildlife management, obviously with greater populations, you start to have limiting factors. When, Mother Nature pretty much takes care of itself. When you have an increased number of any population, raccoons
right now.
there's going to be
Distemper.
disease. Eat outs for muskrats in marshes. They get too many, they're going to eat and then they die off. They eat all the vegetation, the cattails, and then the cycle starts over again.
So are we at that point with deer? Do you feel like and let me ask you another quick loaded question here. 1985 versus 2025, has the population doubled or tripled or roughly? I mean, if you're going to answer that in your gut?
My gut's going to tell me from 1985 to 2025, we're probably 3 times.
So, okay, so why, I guess is my question, from a wildlife management system, why is that? Is it not enough hunters? Is it we're not good enough hunters? Or, I mean, what happens with that?
That's absolutely happening. Hunting numbers are declining. I mean, there's not large predators on the landscape. We got the agricultural landscape mixed in with housing development, edges, rural areas. We've created, there's plenty of food resources for the deer. Animals need basically, food, water, cover, and arrangement of space of all those within space to survive, right? So, these giant bucks live in tiny parcels in the middle of suburb Columbus. There's professional hunters made their living on these city deer.
Yeah.
So they figure out how to. They learn.
They pattern
They
the people.
learn, in my opinion.
They pattern the
They
people.
learn and how to survive. I mean, if a coyote is killing her young down here, I think she then drops them in my yard or drops them in.
Yeah.
I think they just learn.
And and truthfully, everybody hates on the coyote, but that's something I do know about deer. About 50% of your fawns are going to die. Period. Whether they're eaten by a coyote, exposure, hit by cars.
I saw a farmer at a wedding this weekend, and now everybody drills a cover crop in the fall.
Right.
And so this wheat comes up, and then they haven't. So he said he's ran over like 4 planting
So there's
because they have their fawns
sense.
out in it.
Makes sense.
there's places like South Carolina, where predation does has a limiting factor. And that's a different ecosystem, a different type of habitat, crop rotations, cover, pine forest things. So, those predators down there, there's been some research that show they can negatively impact the deer. There's other research out there that even in areas devoid where there are no bobcats, coyotes, bears, or wolves, you got about a 50% survival rate, period.
I say bears are efficient hunters.
Yeah. So bears are really great fawn predators because of their search mode.
They just grit it off.
Yeah, and coyotes will take a fawn out of opportunity.
Fawns are basically mice, and aren't they?
Yeah, anything a coyote, a rabbit, a chipmunk, a field mouse, the neighbor's cat.
Yeah.
Whatever they get the opportunity. That's because think about this.
Oh, so I got it. So you're saying bears will actually
They will grit a hillside off.
Yeah, they're going to hunt a territory where a coyote is going to mosey through the woods and then attack and kill.
A fawn,
if he comes across something.
Fawn jumps up in front of him, or he flushes a field mouse.
But that's when studying the fawns, basically their first 10 days is their safest time of their life.
Why?
They don't put off any odor.
They put off no odor, and they will not flush.
Yeah, they eat. They don't make noise. They eat about 3 times a day. Mom drops them. They stay right there. She comes back, feeds them, and gets the heck out of Dodge because she doesn't want to attract any kind of danger to her babies.
Yep.
And they will leave them in some of the craziest spots. I saw in Zanesfield, I saw a post on the Zanesfield community, the fire station in the park in town. Doe left 2 fawns yesterday right on the footer, the cement footer of that sign in town.
She's not coming back for those.
No,
fawns.
she's coming back. The people
Really?
have made posts. They watched her coming back. So they're probably not there today. That's one thing I tell people all the time. Leave it alone. Let it set for 24 hours. If it's still there, then we'll talk. But there's no rehab of deer in Ohio.
Gotcha.
The disease risks are too great. There's too many. Who wants more deer? I mean, besides us.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. To a certain point, what I think we really want is we really want more quality deer, and more quality deer doesn't mean a deer behind every bush or tree.
It means less.
It means a lot less.
So
we're approaching social carrying capacity versus biological carrying capacity.
Gary, let me play devil's advocate here. Let me always ask the typical hunter questions, right? Like why don't we have too many deer in Ohio? Why don't we extend gun week? Why don't we give more tags? Why don't we make tags cheaper? I mean, what are kind of the thought processes on your guys' side to those kinds of questions or comments?
First of all,
because we want to use this as this is great information. I want to hear.
Gary and I talk about this a lot.
Well, all right. Well, good. Go at it. No, I'm just.
We do.
Procrastination, first and foremost. How about this? You're hunting trophy bucks, right? First mature doe comes by. What are you doing?
Hoping there's a big buck behind her.
Is there? What if there isn't?
Yeah.
I hear this all the time. I'm going to hunt does after I get my buck, get my target buck, because I don't want to potentially take out a doe that might be an estrus that might draw that buck in during the rut, right? But what really happens is that if you take your buck, the chances of you killing subsequent antlerless deer throughout the season crashes. A hunter will take more deer if the first deer they harvest out of the year is an antlerless deer, whether that be a yearling doe, a mature doe. But the other part of that is how many deer do you want? Ohio's a 1 buck state. There's a reason we got great bucks, because it's a 1 buck state. But if you hunt that entire buck most of the season without taking any antlerless deer, it gets harder to take those antlerless deer. And you're kind of like, do I really want a second deer in the freezer? It's not, even if you can donate the deer, have people for deer, there's still time invested.
How about you shoot 4 more does, you earn another buck?
Yeah, there's
I
lots
mean,
of,
there's just tricks.
there's
I don't know.
There's lots of ways to skin a cat. I think,
Yeah.
but from what I heard Gary say, and by the way, I think Joel, even Chris this last year, myself, did a great job of taking does. And I think
hard.
It is hard.
Man.
It's because but I so I guess my question, are we saying that is the point to just be a hunter and take I mean,
Well,
God,
you know,
because if you don't, I get the whole buck situation. I'm not trying to be
I
contradicting.
hunt deer because there's no pheasants left. But no,
I don't even hear 'em
I
anymore.
joke.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm a different kind of deer hunter than. I mean, sure, I want to kill a booner. You know,
But they're very pockety around here,
right,
correct?
if you-
It'll be super high numbers.
yep.
And
If you don't have one to kill, you can't kill one. If your access and there's not a mature buck on the property, you know, I've learned some things from Tim Woods and Joel over the years. You know, they help me out a lot. You know, but if I don't have access to where they're at, and you know, I've got a couple of spots that isn't terrible, but I'm relying a lot on stranger bucks to just wander in front of me. And then I see these really nice bucks that I want to kill. At least they've got me trained. I quit doing that. Unless it's
Gary sends
by
a trail
mistake.
picture, and we're like, nope, he needs another year.
Yeah.
Nope,
And
Gary's like, I only get to see like $3 a year.
yeah. And then Tim calls me up and says, guess what? This buck was killed by the neighbor and that buck was killed by the neighbor. And I'm like, I passed each one of those like 3 times last year.
I did what you said.
You know, and I don't.
That is hard.
And I don't
That's
have a
hard.
buck, but you know,
So back to Joel's point, has the Ohio, because I feel like, I don't know this, but I feel like the deer population is slowly going up.
yeah. Well, not even so much slowly. It's going up.
I mean, they all have twin.
So longer
have two twins,
triplets.
longer seasons is not necessarily the answer.
No.
And that's where I was getting at that procrastination.
Procrastination, yeah.
You know, that's why gun seasons. Joel and I can remember we had a 2-week gun season. I was probably in college or shortly out.
Forgot all about that.
With 2-week gun season, they killed less deer than they did in a 7-day. It used to be 5 days, Monday through Friday. There weren't even any weekend opportunities. So there's social economical aspects to setting game regulations and seasons and pricing for permits and things like that. And
So I guess let me ask, if you can talk about this, let me ask it a different way. Is anything that you can share being done that's coming in the future, being talked about right now as a solution? Anything you can share. If you can't share, I get it. But
well, not really that I'm aware of. You know, you can look at the stats. You know, the average hunters this last season killed 1.5 deer, and bag limits in most counties is 3. Some counties is 4. So if you're not harvesting up to your bag limit, you know, you can have a bag limit. Now there's the one-offs, the 1%ers that, you know, we had a bag limit of deer in Ohio. It was 18 per season at one time. If you played all the zones, the
regions.
number of tags and all that, you could lawfully harvest up to 18 deer. And you know, some areas, so deer are not equally distributed across the landscape, but the smallest management unit that many state agencies have is a county or maybe a deer management unit. Some states issue quotas, some have bag limits. That's their one. So yeah, I bet you know, Joel, Tim, probably all of us, if we wanted to, we could harvest 10 does easily off of our properties.
I have farms, and you cannot kill enough does
Yeah.
off of them.
Yeah.
You just can't physically hardly
Yeah.
do it throughout the year.
you said something. I want to go back to it. 1.5. You said every hunter in Ohio killed 1.5 deer this year. Are you including every gun and bow hunter? Or
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what did the number was that? Has that always been the number? Or,
No. You know, back.
So that's just the harvest versus the number of tags sold.
It used to be you could expect like 1 in 4 hunters would be successful any deer. We're not talking a big buck or whatever.
Oh, got it.
We're talking success
So that's
rate.
pretty good then, 1.5.
So we've hit about a 50% success rate now. You know, I looked up a couple of stats today.
Sorry, Gary. I got to ask. What does did I misunderstand? I thought the 1.5 meant a hunter for however many hunters we have in Ohio.
Yeah,
they're
that's what
killing.
I felt like that
Licensed
meant.
hunters.
They're killing 1.5 deer per season.
So if we have, you know, 200 and, you know, 300,000 deer hunters, you know, out of that 300,000.
Kill 400,000 deer.
450,000 deer.
450,000 deer.
We didn't kill that many this year, but if everyone was successful, then, you know, so what I'm saying is the average take per hunter is 1.5 deer. So you take the total number of deer harvested which I don't know that number right now off
Sure.
the top of my head, and divide that by
How
the
many
amount of
hunters?
hunters, you're going to get 1.5.
That makes
So,
sense.
Got it.
and it
So
is
somebody may have killed 3, and somebody may have
yeah.
killed none, and
6,
somebody. Okay.
0.
Did
Yeah,
is that number lower? We're going to come to your statistics here in 1 minute. Is that number lower or higher than what it's been in the past?
Yeah, it's increasing. So I think the 23-24 season, I believe it was like 1.3. So for the 24-25, it's probably up to like 1.5.
So you guys have to be totally statistic driven. I mean,
Yeah.
correct?
So are we having less hunters that are better hunters, or are we? And then my next question to that is do you increase the bag limits to take into that number an equation? Like, it's going to be 1.5, so you give everybody 4 tags per county because it's all going to level out. I mean, do you play that game?
Yeah, that in theory that's how it is. But let me talk a little
Go
bit
ahead.
bigger scale than Ohio. You
Yeah.
know, so we're talking the 23-24 season, according to the National Deer Association, which I strongly can't recommend. If you want to learn, you learn a lot about how to kill deer from influencers and podcasts and the professional hunters. You want to learn a lot about deer and deer management, you need to look at credible sources. And that National Deer Association is one of them. There's some of the finest deer researchers out there. Another podcast out of Mississippi Deer University, Mississippi State University, Dr. Steve Damaris, one of my former professors. They know a lot about the science of the wildlife. If you want to talk turkeys, talk Dr. Michael Chamberlain. That doesn't mean those guys can go out and kill booners every year.
Who
They
was the
probably
guy
don't.
for deer? Who was the guy?
Well, out of Mississippi State, it was Steve Damaris.
Steve Damaris.
Yeah.
Kale and Sear is going to
Yeah,
be 20
so-
minutes from there.
Yeah.
Nice.
So Deer University, they got a podcast. So,
Deer University.
I've actually watched their
Yeah.
their clips.
So Kip Adams with the National Deer Association.
heard of Kip Adams. Yep.
Kip's a super guy. I've met him a couple times at deer steward workshops, but not to name drop too much. But let's talk about a statistic from that report. 2023-24, 3 million bucks harvested nationwide. 43% of those 3.5 years or older. So you hear a lot of talk on
pretty good.
internet.
It's really good.
So as compared to the turn of the century, as we were joking, I used to think 1900, but we're talking 2000. What year were you born, Corey?
1992, baby.
Okay. Chris?
01.
01, there you go. So,
Born at the turn of the century.
a year before Chris was born, the average deer harvested nationwide, antlered deer, was a year and a half.
Wow.
So a lot of you guys hear it, age classes are crashing, they're dying, we're killing too many.
I don't think that at all.
But I hear it
I
hear it a lot, or I read it a lot, especially on social media.
Sure.
That this is killing the age class, whether it be the crossbow, but we're killing more 3.5-year-olds. And the reason is you can be more selective.
I think cameras changed the age
Cameras
class.
have changed it because, I got to admit, my motivation for going out.
Your motivation has changed when you send me pictures of
Yeah.
what you get paid.
Yeah. So it's like, man, there was a buck I really wanted to harvest the last couple of years, and one was a giant and one was a basket rack. But Joel will tell you that 6-point built like a tank.
Yeah,
it's a mature old deer.
I said,
Yeah,
age over inches, baby.
Yeah,
Age
shooting.
over inches. I mean,
That's actually one of my dreams, to shoot a 6-point, like a
Yeah.
big mature 6
So
point.
probably the best chance I have of killing that buck is to, poach him from Joel's window with a high power rifle and he's food plotting.
Tim
in
has
his
like a
front yard.
140-inch 6-pointer
Yeah, yeah. And 6-pointers are just sexy.
in velvet.
They're just sexy. You get that, you get a 140-inch 6-point. That's like killing a booner, in my opinion.
140-inch. I'm trying to process the numbers here.
Yeah.
Think about it.
So, I mean,
It's basically a giant 8 with no brows.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
or you can have one with brows and just
huge spread.
wow.
Yeah, big spread, long tines.
Oh,
Yep.
God, I drool over that. That's great.
I saw an Arkansas buck that was nothing but basically it was a spike, and it was like 23-inch spikes.
Wow.
I've never. That looks like a big old elk or a big spike elk.
Obviously, I don't think something was probably wrong with it, maybe, but it was amazing to look at. So when you think about that,
It's pretty awesome.
the age class, so, 50% of those bucks were a year and a half old 25 years ago.
I'd say we're doing a
of
good
the
job.
harvest. Yeah. So we're doing a good job, but
So in the day, brown, it was down.
brown
I
was
mean,
down. the
most part.
you can be selective. You got trail cameras. You can wait on more mature bucks. You can shoot what makes you happy.
What is breeding more though, a 3.5-year-old buck or a 1.5, 2.5-year-old buck?
We
Is
already
that
we already talked about
Yeah,
that. It's wide open as
it's
far
across
as
the
the
board.
whitetail
So-
sex. It don't matter.
So does can actually get bred by more than one buck and have fawns that are fathered by different bucks.
Yeah.
And so it can be wide open. Truthfully, I'd say those, if I were going to be a betting man, and there's probably some research that has showed it, those young guys, those teenagers are out chasing hard. When you get to be old like Joel and I, we're staying at home with the wife.
Yes.
We're not.
I mean, I'm convenience in my own bedroom.
Yeah,
that right?
exactly. And I think that big bucks do the same thing. I think those big mature bucks, they didn't get old like that
Yeah.
by chasing does all over willy-nilly.
Right.
And in any wildlife population, the highest mortality rate is, it should be obvious, young males.
right?
More young males of anything get killed. Why? Reckless behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you learn, wisdom comes with age, and I think with critters it's the same way. But so that tells you right there, and at the same time, those harvests are decreasing. Hunter numbers are decreasing, mature age bucks are increasing, success rates increasing. The number of hunters are decreasing very quickly.
Very quickly.
Very quickly. And I know I've talked to some folks. Oh, there's too many hunters around here, and yeah, probably around here you've put the place on the map.
I know.
So but I'll drive around. So my opinion is that I don't know if this means anything, but during like gun season, for instance, I drive around. I don't see
It's a ghost town during
I don't
gun
see
season.
anybody during gun season
There's-
anymore.
There's gun hunters out there, but they're bow hunting with a gun. They're setting in one spot. They're hunting a target buck, hoping that he messes up.
Well, and I mean, it used to be, so here's another thing. Like, I used to see a ton of bucks during gun season, Ohio Gun Week posted, and I just don't see it as much as what.
Because if people have a week's vacation, they now take it with their crossbow
Yep.
Yeah.
during the rut.
Yeah. I would rather hunt from maybe a little before Halloween to Veterans Day.
Yep, that's it.
I can think back. I think a lot of the bigger deer Dad killed was like November 17th, stuff like that. The biggest one was obviously a gun season. I think Joel killed one.
I like the
same
teens.
season. Yeah. So
like the
I would
teens.
say from Halloween through the teens in November. But me personally, because I've become somewhat of a fair weather guy, I like to hunt that. 85% of our does here in Ohio are bred by November 5th.
Can you re-say that?
85% of our does in Ohio are bred by November 5th. So what you're hunting
So
that is calling peak rut is really probably mid rut or post rut.
And it's peak rut because they're searching for the last man standing or last woman standing.
because we are by cameras out and stuff. We're seeing and fawns dropped and do the 200-day count back, and we're looking at like October the 15th through the 20th and stuff. A lot of fawns.
I think it was 2 years ago, had a call on a spotted, 3-day-old fawn in the first week of January.
But then down around the game farm here, every year there's a doe, there's a little one as the season's starting, and it's like, so that's a February bred deer.
When those fawns hit that 80, 90 pounds, they come back in.
Yep.
And a doe is just, they'll come in, if they don't get covered, every 30 days, they'll come back in heat until they're bred.
Until they're bred.
And then they have
That
to
could be
reach
February.
that certain. I've had reports of does being bred during turkey season by velvet buck with nubs. I've seen video of it.
Because they're not being bred, they go out of cycle, they go back to the
cycle. That's a late
cycle.
season fawn that's finally got enough nutrition to get up to that pound.
Can you
poundage. She comes
imagine
in
when
heat.
you're like about to drop your horns and it's February and here comes a little thing coming by that just now weighs 90 pounds and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to get it one more time this year.
So, I think that's why
It don't get no better than that.
these year and a halves and 3.5s do a lot of that breeding, and the 5.5s and up don't. But yeah, exactly. Here comes the new girl in town.
Just to clarify, I think our generation likes them a little bigger than 90 pounds. We like them a little thicker now, don't we, Chris?
Yeah, well, I was a senior when my wife was in the 7th grade, but I got to admit I didn't pay much of attention to that back
Yeah,
then,
there
so
you
it's a
go.
little
Yeah, I
different.
hope not.
I
yeah.
think when I graduated, my wife was still on the playground.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
I think she's younger
Cradle
than
robbers.
she's younger than my wife.
Okay, let's take one quick break.
There's no such thing as a call buck. I agree with him. The research there, this spike this year could be a booner 4 years from now.
Yep.
But the resources, genetics and resources, when I say resources, food, and being able to live long enough to take full advantage of that mineral, that protein, and get big. So you could probably have one that has very poor genetics, have the best resources available. You can throw all the mineral, food plots, whatever you want at him, and he's probably going to hit his potential at a certain age, just like athletes.
Right.
I've never slam dunked a basketball unless I stood on a 6-foot ladder.
I mean,
that's microphone. Yeah.
I've had deer that I felt could have been their best at 3.5 or 4.5.
Yeah.
Well,
and then
I mean that
other-
athlete conversation is that's a good point. I actually think, like if you're,
well, my best deer ever, I'll tell you, I worked really hard that season. It was 2017 when I killed what I would call my best buck.
by the way, headphones are on, so we're running again.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yep.
So, mainframe 10, 23-inch inside spread. That's unique alone right there. Didn't have a lot of mass, didn't have a lot of time length. Scored probably 155. The heartbreak, 2.5 years old.
No way.
Yeah, I would have never guessed. I was pumped. I was excited. Well, we can talk about the last buck I killed. I thought for sure was a booner, but
I was part of that one.
yeah. But I
In
do.
what way were you a part
I do
of it?
want to
Recovery
tell
or what?
Recovery.
I do want to tell a story that goes to Joel's character on that, because he may not remember what he said.
He doesn't like compliments, by the way. Go ahead, Gary.
So, I had pictures of this really high, tall buck. I mean, you may have even seen him a few times. Really tall, high point, main 8, probably the biggest 8-point I have ever seen in my entire life. And it's getting late in the evening, and I'm, hunting on a blind in standing corn, and I see this tall, high, symmetrical from 300 yards with my retinal detached, terrible eyes.
ABC Comer eyes are not very good.
Yeah.
What's the ABC?
Accessible by
Comer.
Oh,
that's another story.
Yeah, that's another story for back in the day.
But I saw this buck at like 300 yards, and I knew he was probably going to come, and I knew where the shooting window was, and I'm hunting with a crossbow, not ashamed of it, red dot. I'm like, I'm finally going to do it. So I shooting sticks. I don't even look for the headgear, the ears, nothing. I'm looking for that front leg. And when I see that leg step forward at under 30 yards with that pocket right back here, bonk. And I'm like, oh, and I'm calling him like, Joel, I got it. And okay, calm down. Let's go get him. And, we wait a little while, and I saw it fall. We weren't seeing much blood, nothing. And I'm like,
He was sure he saw it fall.
Screw it. I'm booking across the field. And I get up there and I'm like, oh. And I was like, man, that's some serious ground shrinkage. And I remember Joel saying, hey, did your heart get pumping? Were you excited? How did you feel when you pulled the trigger? And was that great? And I said, yeah, man, I was like about to hyperventilate. And he goes, you had a good hunt. And he said, it's really hard to kill a big deer where you're hunting at.
yeah.
And so I killed about a 125-inch, 2.5-year-old.
I was way nicer to him than I am to some of my clients.
Yeah. Well, and you better be, because I have currently I still have access to some things to help you out every now and again.
A client, I'm very good at, I don't say a word.
Yep.
I just pull in, throw it in the truck, and I don't say one word.
And they
can tell I'm pissed.
Yeah.
But, and then I'm going to do better. And
then this year,
And then the following year, it's
he passed a couple nice
Really
deer
nice.
this year.
really nice deer.
Yeah.
and then they're dead.
Yeah.
We think they are. The only one
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure might still be out there is the 6. And he probably doesn't score 100.
But he is a big old deer.
I think that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, he is a
So,
big old
but
deer.
you know, the thing that'll keep me going back is one, I only have access to where I have access. I disagree with one of the things.
Hey.
I don't think the property are easy to get as you guys think there still are.
Hell
out
no,
there.
they're not. We'll talk. Yeah.
Well,
but,
I didn't mean that.
There are probably some out there if you're willing to travel
but
with, yeah.
Real quick, Gary's property last year is there. It was not planted.
Right.
It was field tiled, and after they harvested wheat in it in July, they tiled it, and there was no food there.
So it was bare.
It was
dirt.
bare. So
And
it's going to be cropped this year, and
yeah.
it will be better.
I had set up
It'll be better.
for, with my hillbilly wagon blind, I was set up for that.
Dude, there were times I would look out there, and there'd be 50 deer out in front of that thing. I'm like,
yeah.
hopefully Gary's in there tonight.
Well, and we did. We
Not sure how Gary's getting out at the end of the night, but
well, and you're right. That was a real difficult. I tried to beg for people to.
You need to
flash
have me drive
headlights.
down and get
drive
you.
in. Noah did it a couple times for me when he was still around. But a lot of times,
FYI, I'm watching Texas Tech behind you on the TV.
okay, cool.
So, softball.
I've tried some crazy stuff. I've let loose with predator call and everything out the window of my blind to see if they leave. And most of the time they look up and go.
So
And just
Joel,
go right back at
let's ask a question because I just wrote it down. How, if you're a guy that's in the stand and you don't have anybody to, what do you do not to get, if you have deer in front of you, how do you not bust deer out? I mean, how do you do it?
Well, I mean, that is, you can bust out a coyote call or something, and it usually will send them.
Is that the best approach you have or best
I
advice
try
you
to
have?
figure out the way the wind's blowing and walk farther. I will make sure I at least exit to where the wind's blowing away from the deer.
I mean, wait till it's
in pitch black.
0, dark, 30, dark, and then just good wind in your back, good wind, and go, like Gary said, go out of your way if you got to.
So what is
And that's not ABC, by the way.
Yeah.
And I've started doing that the last few
did?
years. Yeah,
Good
I
for
mean,
you.
I got to say, I didn't hunt the wind until you and Tim started saying, Gary, you got to hunt the wind. I just deer hunted. And that's okay if there's people who want to deer hunt. But it was about me just killing deer. It still is about killing deer for me. If I get lucky and get those inches, great.
I mean, we talk about that a lot. It's all about the right day versus the
vulnerable
But
day.
I do not hunt as many days as I used to, by far.
And you can kill more stuff doing it that way, really.
And, I still try to fill my antlerless tags, and I do not, if it's day one and there's a doe, I'm taking it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That needs to happen more.
that should happen more because
that
you're
needs to
right.
happen more.
Folks, we know hunters will kill more deer if the first deer they kill is an antlerless deer. And let's face it, you kill your antlerless deer, then you start hunting a big buck, and you get later in the season, then you're willing to take maybe a little smaller buck, or maybe you'll take another doe. Then it gets right down the end. You're like, I got 2 in the freezer.
But people think they're going to kill a doe that's going to bring that doe later is going to bring them. That buck's not going nowhere.
I've heard
that
countless
buck's not
stories
going nowhere.
of guys killing a doe and bucks coming in, prodding with their antlers, trying to get her up so he can breed her.
Yeah.
So they could care less if that doe gets shot.
Is it, in my opinion, I have 3 questions here. I'm gonna make one comment. When we talked about property on the one episode, it was, I think that getting property to hunt, for Joel's level, it's hard to get property to hunt. For a guy that wants to go out and get property, in my opinion, if you go out and knock doors and you work properties, you can pick up 1 or 2 properties a year. That was my comment.
Yeah.
For Joel, it's difficult to pick up several properties. For a guy like Chris and I, if you want to go out and you want to talk to people and you want to help the farmer, I think you can still get properties.
Small
is my
parcels.
Small parcels, in my opinion, are absolutely
and
some of the
there's-
best if they're the right place parcels.
And I just think, and from my perspective on me, it is just the insurance, the liabilities is what now. Even places that I've had forever, they've now come to me and want every hunter to sign a waiver or something.
There's a big
and it's
difference
because of insurance.
There's a big difference between him and I knocking on the door versus you as a business. It puts a different thought in their head.
It does.
Leasing does change the recreational user law. So written permissions required by law, but it also, there's a revised code that exonerates from liability to landowners.
From the state of Ohio, is it not? Or
Well, a landowner, if I got written permission from a landowner, he's not liable. But if I pay him to hunt, then he has a level of liability. So if I'm paying a lease, that's when the insurance policies and stuff go up.
Sorry, document that time. I really don't want that out there, to be honest with you.
What?
I mean, I really don't want that what you just said out there. I think it's going to create a lot of issues for people and hunters to get leased property and bring other friends in and stuff. I think that's going to hurt.
But I mean,
I get it. I get it. That's the truth.
Joel's
but
doing
that's
a
going to hurt
business.
people.
He's paying. He has to pay for that.
Well, it's like
to satisfy that hunter.
I lease a couple properties, and I don't want the people that are, or anybody to not be able to bring friends and
So
stuff.
then you
because
got
it's gonna,
barter system too.
yeah.
correct.
So what?
Or
so
I give them cash.
You gotta really. I don't blame you. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, but to your point though, everybody needs to sign a permission slip. Is that kind of the way around it?
Well, actually, if Joel leases a property, he can. So landowner-driven complaint. So him leasing basically makes him the owner. If he says, Gary, you can go hunt this stand.
Oh, really? Oh, then that's kind of a positive in my opinion.
So what the landowner wants is, so if I'm with whatever insurance company, they want their name listed separately on the policy. So basically, they will get a certificate from me with just their name on it.
An umbrella policy.
Yep.
That's not how I understand you just said that. That's okay then. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Or do you still want to cut that?
I don't really like to talk about all that craziness but
I don't want to hurt anybody that's trying to hunt or lease is what I don't want to do.
Well, depending on what attorney you talk to, what insurance person you talk to.
I mean, so then people will ask if you make them sign a liability waiver, and several attorneys have said a liability waiver is like writing it on toilet paper. I mean,
it doesn't exonerate you from negligence. So if I get
we'll move on.
Yeah, negligence. Written permission. I fall in a bear pit that somebody digs for me. You're liable.
Yeah.
So I did want to clarify. Jumping back another subject. Coyote calls are okay. I've never actually thought it. I mean, I haven't thought of that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay to let out some predator
they
calls.
at least look their head up, and they might. But Gary said they might go right back to eating.
Is there any other tips you have for other than complete dark? And what's the big?
I've thought about a headlight on a remote control vehicle that I stage to drive down.
Is there any other tips other than complete dark? Or is complete dark even helping? Does it help to? I don't know the vision of a deer.
I mean, they navigate at dark or whatever. But I mean, at nighttime, if it's dark in the morning and you're walking into a stand, you can almost walk right by a deer.
Yeah, they almost feel more comfortable because they don't get shot during the night, right?
They're comfortable at night.
So it's better to. So if it's, I want to clarify this as a teaching moment for me and everybody. If it's we can hunt 30 minutes after dark, we should wait like 30 minutes to an hour after dark to get down.
It's after sunset actually, and you can still 30 minutes after sunset, you can still see pretty good. I think the key is if you have a partner, like if you're trying to eliminate your path in and out. If I had someone driving
right to the tree and get you, that's what we do.
Yes.
I mean, the best is
we don't have the option.
best is
because they're going to
if you got
vehicle.
binoculars and you're losing light, and what you want to shoot is not near,
get out,
get down, and make a run for it.
Okay.
Get out while the getting's good.
And I do that a lot.
If you get buckled down and there's a lot of deer out there, don't give up your position and get down, and them all see you. But then I just wait till it's dark.
So if I can call a friend, hey, can you drive into the field? Can you know?
Yeah. My follow-up question is that, Joel, does noise make a difference? That once it's dark and you can't see, are you so much worried about? Are you still slow walking and creeping? Or are you just supposed to get the hell out? What's better for the deer hunting?
They live by their nose.
Okay.
If they don't smell you, you can make noise. Just get down and get out because everything makes noise walking around at dark.
Yeah, that's a great tip. If you are
you don't need to be super sneaky once it gets dark.
Yep, just get the hell out.
Just get down and get out.
That goes to the point of my luck. I know what I'm supposed to do. I know what I'm not supposed to do, but I still can't execute.
Now that's not saying that. That's not saying that they sit there and watch you, and then she comes over there and smells where you walks or whatever.
But we took 6 antlerless deer off of that hillbilly contraption this past season. So,
dude, every time I looked out there, it was covered with deer.
Yeah.
Was there everything big out there? Or,
that 10 was the nicest one. There was You
The
know,
10 that the neighbor shot.
yeah, there was another, there was another 8 that I thought about, and I only saw him once.
Time.
Didn't have any pictures of him.
So
I want to go into.
let's move on to
Yeah, I want to get into
CWD.
Yeah, I want to. So, Gary, first of all, I'd like to do a definition of both because you see what really upsets me, and this is why I originally called
Yeah.
you. Is I just want a quick, simple definition of EHD and CWD. Can you tell us the definition of those two things?
Yeah, well, CWD, chronic wasting disease, is a transformable spongiform encephalopathy, which means, say that. I can't even say it. But what that is a disease that is caused by a prion, which is a protein. It's not a bacteria. It's not a virus. It's a prion disease, and there are other forms of prion disease. And like in sheep, it's called scrapie. In cattle, it's mad cow disease. There's a human version of prion disease as well. But essentially, what it does is that
What's the human version?
Yeah, what is herpes?
that would be a virus.
That's a virus. Okay.
But and I can't say the actual.
I'm not
I can
talking
say,
by
No.
never mind.
Yeah, talking about. I don't know from experience either. I know as
So
I'm
what
a
is
biologist.
herpes?
What is herpes? Yeah, maybe you want to cut that out, Chris.
Yeah,
I don't know. But what I'm trying to say, it's not a living agent. The prions are not a living agent, and the DNA of it looks exactly like a normal, and to the animal, it feels. In other words, their immune system does not fight off these prions. That they're misfolded protein.
Is it kind of like cancer in humans?
Now that maybe.
We don't.
So what happens? Let me tell you how it kills a deer, and
Yeah.
the reason that people don't necessarily believe in CWD because how many of you are finding dead deer and it had CWD? You don't. Not very often. There are places in the country that they are finding them now, but so eventually over time, that encephalopathy means in spongiform holes in your brain. So a lot of times you'll popular and it just it's pet peeve. It's zombie disease. Well, no. Over a period of time, as the animal matures and the prions are taking effect, it's eating holes in their brain. So they lose their ability to fight off infections.
Whatever portion of the brain it decides to eat.
Yeah, they lose the ability to fight off infections. They're more susceptible to predation, more susceptible to being hit by cars, and also they're easier to kill. And a lot of times, like studies I've looked at in Wisconsin, where the prevalence rate's high, they can almost tell, I bet you that buck's got CWD because he's coming out in the middle of the day going to water. Now, that doesn't mean and you won't see a big giant buck come to water, but they harvest a deer later, a known deer, and guess what? Yeah,
He's got
he's got
CWD.
CWD. So the deer are dying. I use this analogy like men with prostate cancer. You may not die from prostate cancer, but if you live long enough, you probably will have it. So
Most men eventually get it. Yep.
So CWD is really a lot the same way. If they live long enough, or if you have the clinically signs, what you see on the pictures, the drooling, the skinny, like they've been in a concentration camp, and just the constant degrading, those pictures come from a lot of captive research animals.
Right.
So you don't normally see that. You're harvesting a healthy, the first CWD positive harvested in Wyandotte County in 2020 was a stud buck. It was taken to a taxidermist, and taxidermist did a routine surveillance, pulled some tissues after he got the cape off, goes off to the lab, boom, there it is. How to get there? Don't know. Does it really matter? No. Now at this point, life changes because it's just another component of the harvest. It's now we have it.
And as a teaching moment, Gary, that's because the process is slow and takes a long time to develop.
Right.
So to kind of get to that, okay, I have a deer in a pen, it has CWD, it now has CWD, it's 2.5 years old. how long does it take to get to that drooling
Yeah,
standpoint?
it really just depends on the deer, but typically, you start to see those clinical signs at 2.5, 3.5, and if they live longer than that in captivity, they very well might. But chances are something else is going to take that deer. About 2 to 3, about really 3 times the mortality rate for an infected deer versus one that's not.
So to answer that question though, how many years does it take roughly to start seeing those really bad signs? Is it
Again,
I say there's lots of unknowns with
yeah,
this thing, man.
there's a lot of unknowns. 2.5, 3.5 years in captivity, you might start to.
Okay,
Someone
so-
that recognizes it can.
So are they born with it?
There's some evidence to say that a CWD positive doe can
Like a mom
but
may.
but it's hard to detect or it's hard for it to show up in fawns. So a lot of state agencies don't test deer under 1.5 years old, and that's another reason why roadkill, like the state of Pennsylvania found through their surveillance, their first positives that weren't inside a fence, were roadkill, because they lose their common sense.
lose
Yeah,
that
the
common
ability.
sense.
So that's a CWD in the big picture. It's not a protein. It's not a virus. It's not a bacteria. EHD, which I wish there was a whole different name for that.
I know.
Because the acronyms, and I see on social media people they're talking about EHD and calling it CWD and vice versa. So CWD currently right now does not have an end game.
What doesn't have an end game?
CWD.
Okay, yes.
Meaning it's there, it's going to continue until science catches up. I mean, there's not a vaccine.
So is there stuff out there that you can, like, a person can put in a mineral site that they're eating on the mineral site that, like,
I won't say
I think
that
high fence places
yeah.
I thought there was, or
I won't say that there isn't, but it's not clinically proven.
Right.
There's not enough research. There's lots of things you can buy. I mean, from a nuisance wildlife standpoint, I see repellents, all kinds of things that you
Right.
can sell, but it basically means if my grandson gets in the bottle and eats it, he won't die from it. But it doesn't mean that it's going to keep the wildlife away. So, when I say there's no end game to CWD, meaning once it's in a system, it's going to continue to progress. At what rate, I don't know exactly. Prevalence rate, if you look at Wisconsin and Illinois, northern Illinois, Wisconsin on the border, likely Illinois had it a lot longer than when they detected it. But it's very controversial. Wisconsin went out and went scorched earth around. They didn't kill as many deer as the public would let you believe. But what they want to do is reduce densities around ground zero, where they think that's the epicenter of CWD. So they want to reduce densities. Meaning, so think about this. It's a disease of deer, so less deer, less disease. And so the longer an infected deer is on the landscape, the longer they can spread those infectious agents, which are prions. So, when you start thinking about young buck dispersal and them going, you start talking about does or anchor does. You get big mature does that test positive. That disease obviously been there for a while. That the does might get bumped out of their core area, but then they come back. And so if you can concentrate removing deer around those areas, you can slow it. You can slow it down.
So do you feel this is something that has always been around, and we're just now?
Maybe.
And we're just now.
It's just like, where did it come from? There's all kinds of
I mean,
theories.
you hear in a high fence place or something.
Look at it this way. When I talking to Corey about, Mother Nature's going to find a way. And so we're harvesting less deer, even though
and is it
populations
true
are up.
that you cannot kill it? Like,
Right.
That's what I was gonna. So I wanted to bring that up. You told me something kind of scary about that.
Yeah,
and it kind
I
of
know.
freaked me out.
Yeah.
So it's a
I
little
think you told
science
me about
fiction.
that.
Yeah. You can't kill it. You can't burn it. You can't cook it out of the meat. But don't freak out about it, because there's absolutely no evidence right now that eating a CWD positive venison is contractual to humans.
But Gary, didn't you tell me something like people that process meat and stuff? And I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. They can't. It's like once it's on, those prions
That
are
stainless
so
steel table.
Yeah, those prions are so they just
Yeah.
cannot be removed.
Right. But then what is an infectious level of prion? I can't answer that either.
No, sure.
But can it be detected? I've seen people say, well, feeders cause CWD, or how does a feeder you can find prions on feeders. There's research that have showed that. And in the soils, they actually have dogs now that are starting to key in that can detect, hey, this is probably prions in the soil.
Wow. How do they test for that? Do they look under a microscope?
Like a geigometer.
Yeah,
Well,
CWD meter. No,
what I meant was seriously, like once they find a spot, do they look under a microscope and it looks like something? Or
I'd hate to tell you that.
Oh, no,
I
that's
don't even
okay.
know.
That's okay.
I don't know the methodology. I
Yeah.
just know that it's those prions are spread through tissue, feces, urine, saliva. It can be uptaken into plants. Other animals can shed those prions.
So that's what I am on a place where there's a bunch of alpacas, and he always has all his feces out there, and he burns it all.
The alpacas, there's I think it's a brainworm that they worry about that is a parasite. And deer in the past, they don't want deer around their alpacas, and because of that, and sheep and that kind of thing. The urine in the pasture, and brainworm. There's some veterinary medicine research out there on that. Different. So let's try to talk about the difference in CWD.
Yeah, that's what
So
CWD
when I
and
say CWD doesn't have an end game, meaning yet, I think the wildlife management's goal is to keep prevalence rates low to allow science to catch up with it. So, keep those deer densities low in a core area, but that requires sacrifice. I mean, if Joel's number one farm is the epicenter, he's not going to want an agency to come out and kill every deer on his property, which is probably not likely possible to begin with, but to extremely, you don't want deer densities 50 per square mile in the core of a known disease area, because that's just allowing those animals to eventually come in contact with a positive animal, and then it's a domino effect. So EHD is a hemorrhagic disease. It's an epizootic hemorrhagic disease, right? And that is actually a virus. It's caused by biting, midges. So when I say EHD has an end game, as soon as we get a hard frost, it's done. It's over. Now, it might be devastating in localized areas before that hard frost comes. Because, generally what you don't want to see, I was really worried about it with the drought last year. Mud flats where the biting flies, the larvae and things, bucks concentrate. And that's my theory too. Bachelor groups, when you see 6-8 dead bucks laying in a creek bottom, that's probably a bachelor group. You still see does killed by EHD. There's no question about that. But it's going to end as soon as there's a hard frost. Now, it might take 3 years, but your deer are going to be back. It's going to,
So there was a podcast, a well-known podcast, and they have sites and everything, and they said that it had kind of evolved, and they felt that they were going to see deaths through the rut from EHD.
So being viral, then survivors, right? Like any virus, can build up immunity, antibodies.
Like basically,
so deer that survive EHD. So EHD was a southern disease mostly.
like once you survive it, then you're stronger and you make it through
It's
it the next time.
the reason we have vaccinations for human health.
Yes.
You're really putting not live virus but dead virus into a body to fool your body into creating those antibodies. So EHD has an end game. It's called frost. Now the key to that is what damage did it do until it stopped. And you're probably going to never see, of course, if it's on my farm or my 2 or 3 neighbors' farm, I mean, EHD can kill to the level where you can drive down the road and you can smell it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not EHD you're smelling, it's dead deer.
Dead deer.
I've picked up several deer for Joel that he's found, out prepping for the season, and it's like, I got a nice one, it's dead, and I'll get it tested. And
it was EHD.
It's EHD.
So is EHD, the frost comes, does it go into hibernation, or is it already in the deer?
It kills the
midge fly.
Midge fly, and they don't spread. So the fly bites the deer,
and
the deer doesn't spread it to another deer. The deer either survives it or it's dead generally within 24 to 72 hours.
And it apparently makes them
Yeah. So
like they're near water always.
it's called a hemorrhagic disease. Basically, they bleed out internally. So they'll go to water. It's not a fever.
know that.
They bleed out internally.
How long does that take?
And like I said, they either kick that virus's butt or they're usually dead 24 to 72 hours somewhere in there. It kills them like right now. So when you see multiple deer in an area, there's infected midges. Now, not every midge is infected, obviously. And, that's why it's sporadic. That's why it hits in a township or along a riparian corridor, the river system.
It seems like around here we have so many springs and all of our
That's
creeks
fresh
seem
water.
to flow with fresh water that around my area that don't seem to be stagnant creeks where there's
they need the mud flaps. Those midges like swampy mud, and it usually happens after we get wet spring, and then it gets really dry, and then it gets hot, and then you get a little rain, and those midges hatch, and the deer are keying in on those wet areas trying to get cool.
So this is going to be a big question that so a big thing that and I do it. I'm guilty of it. Like I go in and where areas where I don't have any water, I will go and build my ponds. So could I be creating stagnant areas where the midge is building my own spots?
Very possible. Are they earthen?
Can you aerate?
Ponds or, you could aerate if you put in like a watering tank or something that has flow. But if you just dig a big hole.
Correct. So in other words, you're saying you could almost be better to go get the galvanized 500-gallon tank and get that thing full of water versus digging a hole. And
so I'm not an expert on either one of these diseases, but
sure.
I read a lot of the National Deer Association stuff, and I read the popular stuff because it's more fun. I want to hear about.
I know Iowa's gotten
big deer
whammy
killers.
the past couple of years, boy.
Yeah, and that's generally the way it is. So it'll take a few. Usually it doesn't always hit the same area, but when it does, those survivors build up for a generation.
That's what I was getting ready to say. So if you're a 1.5-year-old or 2.5-year-old that may have gotten bitten by it just a little bit, you are now a survivor.
Yeah, or your body, for whatever reason, fought it off. That's why it's kind of cyclic, because let's talk about a generation of deer. Generation for us, our kids, it's a longer drawn out. So a generation for deer flips over, every 5 years maybe, if you want to say. Deer are getting older, but my point to this is you can have EHD survivors in an area. They built the population back up, go on years, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever, and bam, you could get hit again. And it's because the deer with the immunity have now either died old age or hunting mortality.
So you're now to a new cycle
of deer. So now
you're
back in. So you can get that.
What is stupid question, guys? But what is a midge fly? What does it look like?
I couldn't tell you
Chris,
exactly.
can you Google a picture?
It's in the mud around the stagnant water.
Okay. Is there anything you can
Black
do?
fly.
And it bites them in their soft tissue area around their lips and stuff.
So does that midge fly, I'm just asking a question, maybe none of us know, but does it transfer to any other animals other than a deer right now?
Well, there's different hemorrhagic diseases among different animals. Rabbits have a hemorrhagic disease that I don't know the vector, how that's spread. That's mostly a domestic rabbit thing. But wild rabbit populations get it.
Okay.
Generally, I hear about it in the desert Southwest, things like that. So I don't know the story behind it, but I don't know that there's a way you can go out and spray, insecticide to help reduce. Now, with captive deer, they do. They use misters in the pens. They do a lot of things where they're trying to keep insect management to help, because generally, a wildlife agency wants to know about EHD inside the fence as well as outside. And a lot of times it could show up inside the pens first. So a lot of those, they'll put in mist irrigation systems, things like that, with pesticide in the captive cervids. So what a lot do, and I'll tell you what they did in Ohio, they tried to target those ground zero areas right around the core area.
Because during our gun season, they test during.
Yeah, it's an opportunistic opportunity to collect lymph nodes, do the test.
Yeah.
So like,
So how do you
like
you say
Wisconsin.
lymph nodes? So
There's
how do they
a
test?
so there were targeted removal programs around Killdeer Plains Wildlife Refuge
Yep.
and in that area. And there were some on private property, but it was always voluntary and will and landowner gave permission. And it was not killing thousands of deer. There was all kinds of rumors that don't even bother to come here anymore. There's no deer left.
Just a
As a
couple
matter of fact,
strategically kills.
there was folks that heard 500 were shot in one night, 2 nights before the first deer was ever shot. So
Yeah.
it's not popular. Folks, exaggerate. It's the telephone game. And you there very well may have been a representative in a processing facility trying to secure a place to take those deer, because then the deer were tested, and any deer that was not CWD positive was then
Could be butchered and donated.
was donated to a food bank.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the turnaround time, which is also very frustrating to hunters, it's very difficult to get those tissues to a lab that can test.
How long?
3 to 5 days just to get it to the lab, maybe longer, and then it might take 10 days or more to get it back. So if you're thinking about investing in your processing and all that, and you're wanting to wait, it makes things logistically difficult. But again, I want to go back to, there's no evidence currently, no strong evidence now. The macaque study came out, and that caused a little bit of shock.
What's that study?
There was where they basically fed macaque monkeys known CWD positive venison.
Which are the little ones?
I don't know. They're closer to human DNA than some of the other primates, I guess.
Yep.
And I think they're easy. They're very docile, social, so they're used a lot in research.
Okay.
So they fed them, CWD positive, and a couple of them started to, they developed CWD, but it was in clinical, things, I don't know all the research, but things is
Text on the board.
directly injecting prions into their brains,
Yep.
things like that. Human genome mice, there's research with those, but it's just like the efficacy. I'm pretty well known as the local mole man on how to kill moles. Okay, so there's all kinds of pesticides out there. A mole cannot. Yeah, will it kill a mole? Sure, if you force feed it, because biologically they can't ingest that agent because of the way they feed. So there's all kinds. There's no law on selling something that's snake oil.
Yeah.
It doesn't,
Right.
as long as it doesn't kill humans or
Right.
pets or something. There's no law that says, let's look at deer hunting products. How many, and any hunting product.
Right.
There was a time in my life, if guy we know, Jim Bodemiller, that I was learning to trap from, if he'd have told me to hang a trap on the side of a sycamore tree with a whatever stuck to the pan, I would have done it. Right.
That's how I learned how to fox trap.
Yeah. So my point is, it's buyer beware on a lot of this stuff. Yeah. So CWD follow the money. That's the other thing. It's all about the money. Let me go ahead, since you got me on a roll on this. There is no money. Okay. State agencies to combat CWD, the money that they're spending, it's like all of a sudden a state CWD positive, woo, the stars align, everything, and there's just millions of dollars poured in. No. There was a National CWD and Research Act that was created to try to do research on CWD and prevention and so forth. But the money was never appropriated. The act was created, it was never funded by Congress. So it existed on the books, but no money. So that means state agencies are going to have to divert
To their own money.
Instead of maybe using it on something else. But if you think about the economic benefit of deer, it's $1 billion industry. Why wouldn't you want to invest some money in that? So if you really want to follow the money, follow the social media influencers and the expert university types and the high profile people, find out who they work for. They don't work for state fish and game agencies. They work for
Private industries.
Private industries,
Sure.
captive served, that's the money you can follow. You cannot find money that other that came out of the normal license dollars. So
So, in other words, things being said could have an agenda behind them.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just like you heard, there's all kinds of rumor mills out there. I mean, let's go back to DNRs dropping rattlesnakes out of helicopters with balloons and stock trailers full of coyotes. All these are urban legends or rural legends, if you want.
I mean, the coyotes are.
And,
1985, I caught 13 coyotes in 1985.
yeah, they were
I
here
mean,
in like the 1920s. Just they called them brush wolves, and
Yeah.
one of the first one of the first coyotes killed was right over here, the old mill race. The great coyote hunt. If you look back in history books, they drove it. It was a relative of Marilyn Guthrie that actually on that property. Yeah, it's pretty cool history to look into. But
So I wanted to, just from a high level view, I wanted to recap EHD and CWD because I, like you, see so much information out there. Am I correct in saying that CWD is a prion that gets into the deer's brain and that it affects different parts of the deer's brain, and I'm dumbing this down. It takes years maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years to develop, and it can affect the deer differently, and it can affect their senses differently, and it can take longer or shorter periods of time. Where EHD is a midge fly that lives in the soil and stagnant water that transfers that through a bite and soft tissue onto a deer and creates internal bleeding that can cause a deer to die quickly.
yeah,
Did I get that?
Sort of. EHD is a virus.
Okay.
It's a living. Viruses are living. Prions are not living. The deer creates those prions themselves. So
so it's not
But
extracted
but they do shed those prions and feces, and they can be uptaked by other deer, nose to nose contact. They're scary science fiction stuff.
So EHD is a living thing that kills them. CWD prion is a non-living thing.
Because
it's a protein. It's a misfolded protein. It doesn't have they don't reproduce cellular.
So by
virus.
misfolded, that means it's bad.
Yeah.
So one of my
A
biggest
mutation, if you will.
A mutation.
But it's transferable. That's what's weird about that.
what's annoying to me is like talking to friends or family and hearing them mess up EHD, CWD, and having absolutely. That's why I wanted to kind of recap that because literally, like you
people
said,
see a deer walking around aimlessly in a field. They say, "I saw a deer with CWD."
Yeah.
No idea what they're talking about.
It could be a lot of things. And keep in mind, I'm not an epidemiologist. There are people that are experts in this stuff that they're probably going to watch this and go, "Oh my God, Gary, you messed that up."
No, I don't think so.
But
I think you have a very. I mean, we're not trying to
the
get.
deer that was walking.
Go ahead.
The deer that was walking around in circles in that field that got tested did not have CWD, correct?
Correct, and it did not actually have EHD.
I-
So there's lots of things that
like we got a call for a doe that was just walking around in circles.
Maybe she was bored.
no, there was something. I mean, that wasn't right.
She tested negative for CWD and EHD.
Yeah.
Gary? I just got to ask a question. Why not? How do you test for CWD and EHD? Actually, sorry, not EHD, because I understand that. How do you test for CWD? Do you have to kill the animal? I just wondered about darting. It's just a simple question.
There's not a current live test. They're getting closer. They use rectal tissue. In the captive industry, they're trying to look at genetic markers, basically meaning, deer live longer with CWD. Why? They try to look for which deer might be more prone to say, hey, this one's probably going to get CWD. But currently, no, there's not a live test. I mean, that's what I meant by, hey, we got to hold the line until science catches up. Will there ever be a live test? I don't know. I firmly believe that we'll figure this out, but it, might be, generations. And so the best defense against CWD is in those known CWD indigenous areas to keep the deer numbers low.
Yeah.
Keep the densities low. Because,
hunters, do your part and kill the does.
Hunters are, you cannot manage deer or CWD aspects of deer management without hunters. So hunters, hey, you kill a CWD positive deer, guess what? You just took one of those prion
Good job.
generators. Good job. I'm sorry, that if you chose not to eat that venison once you found out, sorry you lost out on your deer meat.
We can spin this the other way, and we can say, stop complaining about the techniques of the Ohio DNR or Ohio biologist and start killing more deer through the year, because it's only going to help, right?
Right.
I mean,
it's only going to help.
So stop complaining about techniques. Stop complaining about the testing and the killing that has to happen, or the baiting or whatever, and start doing your part and not hunting mature bucks, and start killing a couple does in the early season, a couple does in the late season, whatever. Start doing your part, right?
Yeah, I mean, hunters are essential. So
I can say that with a guy that tagged out last year. So I mean,
yeah.
I'm not one that's just like saying that.
And look at, when it first became very prevalent in Wisconsin, okay, 2000, 2002, they went hard at it. The federal agencies, they were targeting small areas and trying to really wipe out any potentially positive or deer carrying those infectious prions. So they were focusing that. Well, they did that, and Illinois likely had CWD at the same time. And then when they discovered, they started doing similar things. Well, it got really unpopular. Sportsmen, hey, you're killing all our deer. Like you heard, stuff like that started floating around, rumors.
You heard about Wisconsin where they were eradicating every deer in that county.
And they were not. That's the thing. That's what the hunting community, the hunting industry, if you will, the hunters were saying. And then the other thing that's really hard to swallow for people is when that prevalence rate's really low, you are going to kill a bunch of deer or test a bunch of deer, and out of 40,000 deer, they only found 200 positives. Well, big whoop, right? Well, yeah, it is a big whoop if those 200 deer are in a core area, so that you got contact contamination, environmental contamination. So when I talked about those prions can be in the soil and taken up. So if you have a high concentration with a high prevalence rate, they're going to shed more prions, right, into the soil. And once that area becomes contaminated, a deer could come from 30 miles away that's not infected and end up being infected. And so that's what, it's really scary about the disease until we learn more about it. And so the only defense that's really out there, and I'm not alone in saying this, if you research it, if you look at, go to the National Deer Association and read some articles. There's articles on what can a hunter do about CWD. Mississippi State Deer University. There's like 4 episodes that don't take too long. Listen to those things. And, these guys are wildlife researchers, wildlife agency reps. How do you think they got there? Why do you think they got there? First and foremost, that's when I talked about follow the money. Why do you think a wildlife biologist in many cases becomes a wildlife biologist or a university professor that researches white-tailed deer or turkey or whatever? Because they were probably deer hunters or turkey hunters or grew up with a wildlife. So there's no state or federal wildlife agency out there that's going to purposely do things to negatively impact the resource because they're of the money.
Correct.
And,
so it's not like
Joel makes probably more money than I do. It's not that he didn't earn it or work hard, but you see my point? Yeah. There are businesses.
It's unlike COVID, and you have somebody that's sitting on the Pfizer board that's going to make $10 million on Pfizer.
Yeah, I don't even want to get into that. But what I'm saying is that there's not money. No one's paying people under the table.
Right.
The insurance companies are not paying.
You're saying everybody involved is at the deer's best interest.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And, and I hear that a lot. Well, you need to get off your chair and get out in the woods. Well, I'm going to be the first one to show you. I've even demonstrated. Being able to know a little bit about the science doesn't make you a better deer killer.
Right.
There's 2 different, I've never claimed to be this great God's gift to killing deer. do I like to hunt deer? I kind of go do weird stuff, to be quite honest. I like to hunt exotics.
I thought you meant you're doing weird stuff in the woods.
No,
Gary.
I like to. I like to hunt. Feral.
We don't need to know about that.
Feral
Gary.
hogs. Last year I went on an alligator hunt. I drew non-resident tags for this year in Florida that I'm really excited about. That management unit.
That's awesome.
Averaging well over, almost 11-foot average for gators.
Alligators?
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
I'm excited about that.
You had a question you were about to ask.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna say sorry. This is a long one. We're gonna take another break because I have about 4 more questions we're gonna have to get through.
I have one question too.
Run it. Well, you want to write it down?
Break it into volumes, guys.
Yeah, we're breaking it into volumes because I got you, Gary. We're gonna keep you for a minute. Do you want to ask it now?
Yes.
Ask it now.
So
Don't if it starts with a B, don't ask.
If it's freaky stuff in the
No.
woods, I
So-
deny it.
So mine is so they want dead deer,
Right.
but so if we become a CWD county, they automatically do away with baiting.
Joel, I just asked you if it started with a B. Did I?
We'll just cut it.
No. Just I think it's fun. Let's just take our break, and I want to come back to that.
Okay.
So, all right, here we go again. We're back in. Joel, now go ahead and ask your question that starts with a B.
So, I mean, and Gary and I have had this discussion, and in the neighboring counties that are classified as CWD counties, and then they're opening the season earlier, and they want to have trying to kill more deer, but yet at the same time, at the killing more deer, they do away with the baiting. I kind of feel that that's kind of contradictory with
Real quick, does that include mineral sites? Does that include
Yes.
mineral? Okay, so mineral sites,
no
and
mineral
that's
sites and
all year round.
year round.
Okay.
So, when CWD was first found and positive, that shut down, basically landowners, hunters were just don't add any new mineral. Okay, that's really all you could do is stop freshening it up and adding or establishing new sites. And we all know there's natural mineral sites out there.
Yes, there are.
And if you find one of those, that can be a great place to
Old cattle pastures.
to inventory your deer, or sometimes even hunting coming to and from. I mean, one of the things I learned from my big deer killing buddies Joel and Tim is you don't hunt your mineral site normally.
But them suckers do visit them
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah, but
Year round.
again, if all of a sudden you got one on camera that's coming all the time, you're going to hunt your mineral site. I get it, but it's also like trying to hunt the bait deer coming and going from, or hunt the bucks following the does to the bait. That's something new I'm learning. Trying to figure out.
So what is the thought with the baiting and the
So baiting and mineral concentrates deer unnaturally. Meaning when you put a pile of corn on the ground, which is the easiest way without feeders and things, and they come in, they're nose to nose. They pass feces, urine, they concentrate those prions in an area. So if you have an infected deer that's hitting a bait pile or a feeder routinely, it's going to defecate, it's going to urinate, it's going to lick its fawns or the neighbor, her grandma, whatever. And if that's more chance to spread those infectious prions.
But if you watch deer, they are social animals.
Very social.
They lick and rub and
and I think not to hate on the
So, it's very possible that in deer in a captive facility will interact through the fence with deer on the outside and vice versa.
they
do.
lick each other. And
So,
yes, they do.
I heard of a guy that sold hunts that would purposely keep pens of does.
so
Unbred does, if you remember, they come in estrus every 30 days when they're not bred. So if there's not a buck in an enclosure,
They're coming.
that's not a
They're
that's a-
coming.
That's a
I kind
very-
of think his yanker would reach through the fence, and she would probably back up to it.
he'd probably try. Yeah.
that's actually
Dogs have done that.
Please, people, don't do that or
Ask your
even think about doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know.
But
I've
in
taken-
theory, I'm saying. So that's the reason for the no
know.
mineral, the
I,
no baiting.
I want to tell a quick story about that. Grandpa had, when my grandpa and my dad, both my dad and my grandpa, raised labs, he would have, so you'd have OSB in between, and the dog both with my dad and my grandpa, I witnessed the dog chew, break through the wood, go into the next kennel, chew, break, go in, and within like 24 hours,
Through
literally-
two fences?
yeah, like fence. So then they had to put wire. Dad come up with a. My
Dog's
dad,
name was,
kidding me?
that dog's name was probably Pounder the Wonder Dog.
well, yeah,
Oh,
there's a couple
there's
of
a
them.
story
I mean,
I love to tell.
Pounder.
my dad being
Wish that was my nickname.
yeah,
Pounder.
my dad being the
He was a great dog.
Yeah, he was. My dad being the great engineer he was, come up with a fence style with the metal in between of it because it was such a problem when dogs come in heat. They were coming
Sounds like the
form.
New Orleans prison break.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
Well,
but so to your point with deer, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But
So yeah, that's why you don't want to bait.
but so they're I got
That's
a
the reason why it's prohibited.
devil's advocate here. I mean, they're in bedding areas together.
Right,
When
right.
I see does naturally, and I'm not, and Gary, I'm just asking, but when you see them walking through a field or feeding them beans, they're following the same paths.
Yeah,
Deer's walking
licking
the same
branches.
path. I mean,
But I mean, I
Scrapes.
will say whenever
that's a
I'm
great point
Yeah.
right there. Rubs, scrapes.
whenever I'm feeding, it will bring a family group from here
you
and a
go.
family group from
So
here,
it's
and
There
it'll
you go.
bring
There's a
family
good
groups
point.
together.
There's a
The
good point.
commingling. So when we all know when the deer yard up late when it gets cold and they hit the food source and you get I mean, I can where I'm hunting here close. So you can go from seeing a couple deer all the time and then bam, those flip the switch and the crops are just right and these deer are walking from 2 miles away, leaving what looks like cattle trails.
Yeah.
To get to this field. I believe they also they'll start at one end, they'll eat it out,
Just like a goose cleans out a field.
and they'll move or whatever.
So
But anyway, baiting can lead to artificial concentration. And you're right, food plots, agricultural crops, the licking branches, the scrapes, the rubs. If you have an infected deer in that area, it's going to shed prions on there. But the likelihood of 50 deer coming in contact with those prions on a licking branch or scrape or whatever versus a corn pile.
I will stick up for the Ohio DNR here on this subject. And I'm not disagreeing because I'm not intelligent enough to disagree. But like from your perspective, not your perspective, but you guys get what I'm saying. If you put in a roundabout at 235 and 47 and it saves one life because we used to have car wrecks and
Wish it was done when we were kids,
right.
man.
I mean, I remember Amy. So my point is if it saves,
I was in a wreck there.
Yeah.
if it saves one deer from getting, if it helps the cause, is
Yeah.
it worth it? Or from Joel's standpoint, or my standpoint too, kind of, doesn't it does the pros outweigh the cons in bringing bad? I don't want to call them bad hunters, but
I'm very.
let me clarify because I just call people bad hunters if they bait, and I didn't mean to do that. I meant like people that put bait down to people that are trying to attract deer. Is the negatives of them killing more deer, but maybe they're not killing deer. Maybe they're just trying to kill a big buck.
We talked about. You talked about back to the getting permissions and the small properties. The problem with the small properties is the only way you get deer there
you have to
is
bait.
by baiting. I mean,
So you're taking out a whole hunter group. I mean, you really are.
That's correct.
Yeah, you're taking out a whole
I
hunter
can
group.
set in my 3.5 acres
Where you live.
where I live and kill deer. If I sat there long enough, there's a doe or two, or maybe even during the rut, a buck might run through there. But if I feed, I know I can kill a deer there.
How close are we to having Logan County out of? I mean, because that's kind of narcissistic to ask, but
Well,
I mean, or all of Ohio, Gary.
Looking at the current disease surveillance area, it's knocking on the door. There was an increase. There was a positive in Morrow County last year. That now there's a township that is considered disease surveillance area that the no baiting would apply. There are 3 townships in Union County
That's creepy.
It's getting right there.
So you're talking about the southeast corner of Union
Are
County.
they?
So
Are they?
Richwood area. So right there on the northeast part of Logan County, Russellvania area, it's knocking on the door.
Gary, I got to ask this: are they going to look at going smaller areas other than counties, or just?
That's the way it was from the beginning. So let's
Townships.
Yeah.
Townships.
So originally, you try to manage within a 2-mile radius of a known positive. So that's the purpose of a lot of targeted removals, or let's call it the dirty word sharpshooting, where agencies and state agencies that are trying to manage deer will focus that targeted removal on that small area, and then eccentric rings get larger for surveilling. So then it's really hard. Like, do you know what township you're in right now, Corey?
No, I don't.
Union Township.
Is this Union?
Township.
I don't.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
But it's not that far to Harris Township.
No.
I would learn it real quick if you started telling me I had to
Harrison.
focus on
Harrison.
townships.
Harrison. So my point
I
is,
would learn it.
A lot of times when people come in to check a deer in person or online, I was hunting with a buddy. I know it was in Union County. I don't know what township it is. So sometimes the simplicity of regulations is important.
Right.
That makes sense.
Because
sure.
It gets cumbersome.
Right. Yeah. So it's just like county management units are a lot easier than if you start. Some states have, east of interstate, up to the North Fork of the Red River down to the,
Yeah. You couldn't do the township thing.
Townships
No way.
would be tough.
No way.
But
So
the Ohio's DSA regulations are going by townships, though, at least currently, but it's based on how far from a known positive. Because, I believe that why use a shotgun if you can be more precise. So if you only have to limit baiting in this area versus an entire, like look at the positives, they could be. The first one that showed up in Allen County, for example, was 23 miles west of the known positive in Wyandotte County. So does a buck move that far? Absolutely they can. There's research that shows them doing really crazy, stupid stuff. One thing I've learned is I never say never.
23 miles?
Yeah. So a positive showed up 23 miles from, a group of positives. And the weird thing about that was a button buck.
But is it?
No. The last two positives were button bucks, but I think the initial positive,
I feel like
that far apart. So
in my opinion, this kind of feels like COVID to me, right? I hate to say that and correlate it. Maybe I'm stupid and say, but like what I mean by that is, and it was in China, and then a month later it was in Europe, and then a month later, I know that's accelerated, but a month later it was in the United States, and then everybody had it. Everybody had it multiple times. People died, people survived, and now it's kind of dissipating.
And there's still people getting it. But
I don't want to
get into that.
No, I'm not. I'm correlating it to.
Yeah, so it's like any disease, zoonotic. Anything that can be spread. Like we talked about, CWD was a prion, not a virus. So we don't really know. And does it really matter how it got there or how it got spread? Now it's there.
Yep.
So what I started, talking to about the Wisconsin and the Illinois, they found it, they went out, they shot, they targeted those areas trying to, focus on known positives to reduce the deer densities. It got really unpopular, killing all of our deer, it's all about the money. Kind of thing. And so they were forced to stop. So now let's move forward 25, 30 years. I'm interacting with biologists from those states, and I'm like, hey, I hear local people are saying, they've had it for 25 years, 30 years in Wisconsin. There's no effect on their deer herd, and everything's fine. And they kind of chuckle and say, oh, yeah? Well, guess what? Those people that were saying this was not a good, not a real disease, it was a money disease, they've all died of old age, retired, not hunt. Now we got a new generation of hunters are going, hey, why don't we have any deer? What's going on? The numbers are being reduced. Let's move to a less productive system. Western Wyoming whitetails and mule deer. Out west, the deer don't have a recruitment rate near as high as Midwest deer. Meaning, we got.
What do you mean by recruitment rate?
A fawn is born, and then it either lives long enough to breed, whether it's a buck or a doe, but mostly we're interested in does. So we do know, it's real common. Twins are almost the standard, right? Trips are showing up more.
Yep.
If you see a single fawn, either you had a stillborn or something happened right away, or it was a doe fawn that got bred late in their first pregnancy is a fawn. So mule deer are lucky to recruit one fawn every 3 years. So they have one fawn survive to.
That's why mule deer numbers
why-
are on the decline.
So there are places in Wyoming that CWD caused localized extinction of the mule deer. And in the western whitetail populations in some of those places that now have high prevalence rates of CWD, they're going the way of the dodo just like the mule deer. So in theory, what we don't know is that this high recruitment rate in the Midwest, high reproductive rate, how long will it take CWD to become a limiting factor? Because we've run out all the predators, we're lowering the hunter numbers, we're killing less deer, so Mother Nature has to equalize it somehow.
So, Gary, I wanna ask you. We're gonna kind of wrap up here in the next few minutes. I want to ask you some questions that I think you'll like. What can hunters do to help with EHD and CWD?
Kill deer.
Kill deer.
Kill deer. Kill lots of deer.
Kill lots of deer.
Lots of antlerless deer, I might add.
Sure.
Obviously, I'm a firm believer in sticking with the one buck thing at this point.
I do. I like that.
Absolutely.
It's been a good model for our state of Ohio.
Unless there's a rule that says kill 10 does, get an extra buck tag.
Well, that might, I don't know that. Let me, for the record, I don't know that is not on the table anywhere that I know of.
Well, I was just making that up, everybody.
But seriously, with declined hunter numbers, it may take novel motivational ideas like that. Because like I mentioned earlier, 1.3 or 1.5 deer per successful hunter. How many deer do you want? How many deer can you use? It's expensive if you don't self-process.
It kind of comes down to that. It kind of comes down to individual families, how many they eat, how many you.
Can I ask a question about that? Just because I'm going to try to knock through these questions quickly.
About 50% of Ohio hunters process their own deer.
What happened is there used to be a donation. I thought there was a donation for.
There's still some donation programs out there.
What are those for teaching moments in Ohio? What are some of those donation programs?
There is the Farmers and Hunters Feeding the Hungry, which is a national organization that is pretty much a mission-based, church-based type program. And the way they operate is donations as far as fundraising. They get a cooperating deer processor. They pay typically, because it's a philanthropic venture, they negotiate a lower than retail value processing fee to cover basic costs. And then that chapter generally has a local coordinator that goes out and raises money and hopefully gets money matched by the national organization. Some state game agencies fund donation programs with a portion of money and then challenge the local folks to raise money. So here around close, the closest FHFH processor is in Bell Center.
That was going to be my question.
And
so you got to find. So
those. You can look on the website. You can call.
What's the website? Do you know?
If you just Farmers and Hunters Feeding the Hungry, they have a national interactive map. You can zoom to your state, but they're not everywhere. And there's a lot of processors that don't want to sign up to be because they got more deer than they can cover.
That's when the problem come about when the organization would give 60 or 70 and the processor's charging 110, 120.
Yeah, or higher.
That's when it started going away.
Yeah, and the other part is if I'm taking in
what was going on? So
the organization is going to give $60 or $70,
and the
processor charges 110, 120.
Putting a little.
So thus
they weren't following the
rules. They don't do it no more. So the processor just don't do it
because the organization can't afford to pay the retail price.
Right.
And it's not that they don't want to. So the average donation dollar amount range is probably from, depending on the state and location, 65 to 145 for base, and all that those all they don't do specialties. They don't do
Just
it's
do all burger.
It's all burger.
All burger.
So last year, a processor that was a donation processor got a base rate of $85.
I mean, that's fair.
And that was a hunter could kill that deer, tag that deer lawfully, confirmation number, show up. Hey, I'd like to donate this deer. Processor takes down the information, transfers the confirmation number. He processes the deer, calls the local coordinator, and says, I've got 150 pounds of burger. Come get it. Or what they'll do is, okay, they'll go on a list of food banks. They'll call the Gospel Barn over here in Quincy and say, hey, I got 100 pounds. Can you use it? Yeah, we'll be right there. They come to the processor, pick it up, take it, and it gets distributed that way.
So Joel, you're saying that the processor was charging a little upcharge to make the
No,
I'm
the opposite.
saying like the average fee is $110 or $112.
So
it just
$20.
wasn't enough money.
Correct.
Right.
So
Oh.
you just don't deal. You just
So
say, man, I'm not
personally,
And that's
maybe
another reason why hunters won't kill more deer.
maybe I'm a good person, but I remember when I had to pay like maybe this wasn't legal, and I'm not going to say the name, but I used to pay like a $50 charge to donate the deer, and I would because I knew it was going for good thing. Was that not the way it was supposed to work?
No.
Well,
Then I'm not going to. But like I'm okay with that because I like killing deer, and I was donating.
But yet I've had farmers that I lease, and they want does shot off their property, and they say, you just let us know, and we'll pay all the processing fees.
You said that before. That's a good tip. People listen to that.
So
That's a good entry point to a farmer for a service provided as a hunter. By the way,
processing is a limiting factor for deer harvest, and it's one of the limiting factors because, even if you do a base, just cut basic. I get butterfly loins and everything else in the burger. Like Joel said, it's 125. Maybe it might even be 150. The other reason you got processors around here that are good people that would love to donate and participate in a program like that. But if I take in, if I'm a donation processor, there are people willing to drive from 50, 100 miles away. And now I can't take Joel's deer. I can't take your deer because I don't have the capacity. It's a seasonal business. So they don't have the capacity. So, state agencies are looking for ways to incentivize more processors, more storage, things like that.
Let's go into that because that was my next thing.
So you can kill a deer, pay the processing, and call up a church or neighbor and say, hey, would you like this? And some people out there.
When that burger goes to that food pantry or church, it's gone the next day.
Yeah, one deer can provide about 200 meals, to put that in perspective.
So Gary, I had something down here. There's apprentice programs for. Are there not? Are there not? Is there anything that's subsidized or I don't want to say free, but anything for people that want to become processors or anything like that? Is there anything like that?
Yeah, I don't know. That would be an economic development.
I thought you and I briefly talked about that. I could be wrong.
There is some programs that are out there that they're working on that.
Problem is the FDA or what all gets involved with.
They don't. Deer processors are not inspected.
No,
they don't. Some are. They don't have to be custom. So like a lot of places that do beef and hogs, you see it not for resale.
So they're not under USDA.
Yeah, they're not selling. They're selling.
So they do what's called custom processing. When you see all these little hand-painted deer processing signs around, and some of our neighbors that have long beards, those aren't inspected facilities.
They're selling services, not the meat. But I mean, that also goes into butchers as well.
And you can't sell game meat. You cannot commercially
sell game meat.
So I get people that call me up and say, hey, I'd like to have some summer sausage this year. I'll pay for it. And I'm like, well, I can't. I'll get you. You could buy me a new rifle if you wanted to.
Yeah,
but
or you can donate.
But I say here, how about if I kill an extra deer, I'll deliver it to XYZ, Travis, and you pay Travis, pick it up, get whatever you want. That's perfectly lawful as long as you have, had a tag. Things
Here's
like that.
one thing I want to say from a business standpoint and the baiting. So,
go ahead.
When the baiting, when the baiting goes away, Do you know how many 2 and 3 year old bucks will live?
Oh, you don't want the baiting.
I want the baiting to go away.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You don't
So
want
I'm
the
saying
baiting.
when the baiting, if the baiting goes away in 2 or 3 years, you know how many 2 and 3 year old bucks get killed on bait piles.
Earlier
So
in the
when
show,
baiting
I
goes-
argued against that, though. You see the age structure. We're increasing. We're going
I
from
know.
1.5 to 3.5.
I have nothing
So-
against. I agree with that.
so-
I mean, be a better hunter.
but
On
listen
your
to our
property
podcast.
and the neighboring properties around your leases, I would have to agree with you.
But
from
as
a-
far as killing does, the baiting makes it so
Yeah.
easy to kill the does.
Well,
you know,
And
I mean,
and
it
that's just
does.
it. I get that sometimes when I've been working at trade shows and things. I'll get a guy that comes up and he owns 500 acres and he puts tens or 20s of thousands of dollars into food plots and all this, and then he goes,
Some expensive food plots.
I've been raised, 1,000 acres, if you will. That we could talk about that on scale. So the whole point, I want baiting to go away. Baiting ticks me off. I don't like baiting because these guys, 5 acres next to me, they put a 50-pound bag of corn
And
on
are
the ground.
killing my deer.
And they killed my 2.5s, 3.5s, and even my 6.5s. And they're my deer. Well, no, they're not, because wildlife's a resource.
yeah.
They're not high fenced in Ohio, so they really belong to everyone. So, but I can see the guy's frustration. He works hard, whatever he does for a living, and
Still agreeing with you.
And he, but what I'm saying is, from the scale of managing on a county, on a state, the evidence isn't there that you're saving all these 2.5, 3.5-year-old bucks.
Got
Now,
it,
on
yes.
your property, yeah. On
Yeah.
what you control, you try. And honestly, your clientele is not coming here to kill 3.5s. But so the way I look at it, why would we penalize? Why would someone want to penalize the guy that is happy killing that 140-inch, 3.5-year-old? It tickles them. They're excited about it. Just to let that deer go to the neighbors and get shot after.
But I mean, I agree with what
Yeah,
you had said
yeah.
earlier. If it gets to be the end of November and December, and you haven't tagged a deer,
Kill some duck,
and
kill another
shoot
doe.
a doe.
Well-
Why shoot the 2.5-year-old buck? Just shoot a doe or two.
I would honestly challenge everybody, hunt that opener. Hunt your
I
target
agree.
buck, and the next 2 weeks kill
Shoot a
every
doe.
doe you're lawfully
if you
allowed
don't,
to.
I agree. If you don't get your buck killed on the opener right there, them first few days or whatever, and it gets to be the end of September and October, that's a good time frame.
Well,
to
think about
shoot
it
some
from this
does.
way: if you eliminate those does early, they're eating less crops. They're eating less. If you have a bait pile, they're eating less corn. And those old nannies have that core range.
Yeah,
They're not bred yet. You got less yearling fawn does.
Shoot a doe early, and then there's less
So the
competition
rut-
for a doe. There's more competition for a doe.
So you could have, if everybody did that, think about how you could change the intensity of the rut and how many more bucks you might be able to see.
You're changing the intensity of the rut. That's 100% right.
Now, what scale would actually do that? I argue if you don't have
5 million
1,000
followers.
acres, if you don't have 1,000 acres,
I mean, I have
You
a
might as well
bunch of
not save
neighbors
bucks.
that don't own large parcels and they don't shoot does.
Right.
That sucks.
Man,
And
you're just beating your head off.
there's a
the wall.
place east of where I live. I can pull into 100 acre.
They don't shoot does, Gary.
don't shoot
They don't
does.
shoot does.
And
Yeah.
I have friends that hunt around that, and you know what? They can't find a buck. Because why? Because they're all right there. They got
Yeah,
no
why would
reason
you-
to leave.
Yeah.
When if I was stranded on an island with 1,000 women, and I saw a plane flying over, and somebody started putting on a signal fire, I'm putting that thing out.
That's called Bucks in Paradise
That's
Island
right.
there.
I am like, no, I'll shoot the plane down. I don't want to be rescued.
So, Gary, jumping subjects here. Testing any new technologies or anything that people should know about CWD and testing that's coming out.
Well, they're trying to develop a live test. That's really important for captive cervids.
What about stations? Any
and-
kind of stations coming out or anything like
so
that?
you
Go
can-
ahead.
Go ahead. So, they're trying to get to where there's like a hunter test.
Dug below Gary's camera too. Never mind.
Ideally, if there was like a pocket litmus kit or something where I could kill a deer, dip it in there, and go, oh, this is CWD positive. That
Right.
would be great. It doesn't exist. Doesn't mean that it might not someday, but so in a disease surveillance area in most places around the country that have CWD positive, they have drop-off stations, check-off stations. You kill an antlerless doe, you process, you can, cut the head off, drop the whole head off with your contact information, confirmation numbers, whatever makes that doe lawfully yours.
Yep.
The agencies will collect those. They'll remove the tissues required, and then it's sent off to a laboratory, and they can test. It's not something real simple to test. I mean, it takes really sophisticated, equipment and pathologists and things that know what they're looking for. And the lymph nodes that are in the throat up here is the target. There's different types of ELISA, IHC. I don't really want to get into the biochemistry because part of that I don't really understand. There is a portion of the brainstem that used to be the gold standard called the OBEX, and now it's kind of like, all right, we'll do a screening test with the lymph node. It's cheaper, it's faster. It's not detected. Doesn't mean in other words, it's going to scream, this is CWD. Then you go to another level, more sophisticated test.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't pass, if it becomes back not detected, notice I say not detected. You don't say CWD positive or CWD negative. You can say it's positive, but it's not detected because, what if it has it, but it's not showing that it has it yet? That's why fawns, typically you wait for a year and a half old. More older bucks typically are the best canary in the mine shaft, if you will. But then when you get like a 6.5-year-old doe that's positive,
We can hear you talking over there.
it's absolutely been on the ground there for a long time.
Right.
That's an anchor doe. That's a matriarch. CWD's there.
Right.
It's I don't know what the prevalence rate is necessarily, but it's been there. It's going to be there until science catches up.
So Joel, come back in. Let's go ahead and wrap this up now. We got a minute. I think that was Gary. First of all, I wanted to say a couple things. My questions are always about, actually I had one more question. Rumors. What are some quick rumors that you just want to completely destroy? I mean, we talked about a couple of them, but any of them that we didn't touch on that really bother you? I mean, people going out and killing 1,000 deer and, it's just not really happening. It's not happening, people. And understanding CWD and EHD. Gary's a wealth of information. Please listen to this podcast. But what else, Gary?
Probably, I think I mentioned the ones, loads of coyotes being brought in, dropped in. But deer regulations or wildlife regulations, specifically this is a show about deer, setting deer regulations based on the Farm Bureau and the insurance companies.
That's not.
Yeah. So, obviously agriculture is impacted, right? So, if a bunch of landowners / farmers are unhappy, that's going to require an agency to try to shift to, more aggressive management.
Sure.
But from an insurance standpoint, I have insurance people in my family. They don't go cut a check to the Division of Wildlife and say, hey, we want the bag limit raised to 6. Here's some money.
Right.
They have actuaries. They calculate risk of hitting a deer, and they charge you an appropriate premium. So if you live in an area where deer strikes are very, very prevalent, you're probably going to pay more for your car insurance.
Yeah.
A big car dealer in Bell Fountain, I mean, whenever I take mine there, they say they're basically 2 per week for the year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, look at it this way.
Yeah,
2
that's-
per
it's
week
an
for the
average.
year.
Yep.
That is the average.
Deer are an economic driver. So I look at it, hey, I own a body shop. You're paying, I'm getting paid to fix your car. That's stimulating the economy. That's one other way that that would be rough.
I mean, the
we don't want
insurance
to see
companies probably have lobbyists.
Sure.
we don't want to
You know,
see
I'm
our,
sure.
our
Yes.
well, that's how rumors get started. You know, like, hey, we're out, somebody's out asking a processor, would you process some of these deer that are being shot for management reasons? And that turns into, we're shooting deer in Joel's backyard from trucks at night and thousands of them.
Yeah.
That's.
But I mean, there are lobbyists. I mean, let's
Well,
admit there's lobbyists.
There's lobbyists for everything. I think one of my healthcare providers told me that there's like 30 to 1, for every legislature, there's like 30 pharmaceutical lobbyists.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know if that's accurate.
But I mean,
but it still doesn't matter. Ag lobby. I mean, you can say the same thing with corn and soybean prices. There's a corn and soybean growers association. They want to see as much corn and soybeans produced as possible and get paid the highest price for them.
Right.
But supply and demand, you overproduce, then the price obviously is going to go down. So,
but I mean, with 40 years of deer hunting in the state of Ohio, man, I mean, I think our ODNR does a very good job
I think they're
with our
fantastic.
deer herd.
I think they're fantastic.
The other thing I'd like to point out, CRP, that's not a state program. That's a federal program. So that's not hunting and
Tim
fishing.
texted me the other day, and he was like, "Say, if you know anybody, they're like re-upping people here in June."
So that's a farm bill program that is funded from the federal level to the states, and so I get that.
They're a
lot.
little more competitive now, are they not?
Well,
I mean, depends upon your ground.
Depends. So Tim and I would have this. You need more CRP. And what happened to our turkeys when you had farms in your properties?
I mean, when the leased ground went to $300 and $400 an acre, the CRP went away. But when we had CRP, there was turkeys out the butt.
Leased farming ground. Leased farming
cash
ground.
rent.
I just want to
Cash rent.
I want to make sure we differentiate between that.
Cash rent.
So and that's where the lobbies. So let's say I'm representing the soybean or corn lobby. I don't want cash rent to go up because I want to be able to afford to rent the ground to produce more corn and soybeans, right? Because not every farmer can own every acre and make a living off of owning it.
Right.
But CRP rates, there's lobbyists that do not want the CRP rental rates to outperform the cash rent rates, because if I'm a landowner, who am I, and I don't care about farming or wildlife.
They're going to pick which one's higher, right?
How much you give me?
Yeah.
And Joel, you've been undercut on your leases because somebody else comes in and says to this property owner, and
I'll give you this much an acre.
some of them are probably very loyal to you because you've been good to
yeah.
them and they don't want to do that. But there's people,
But
some people have stupid money. They're so stupid they'll pay.
Their CRP getting to 200. Is there?
Yeah, it
200
depends.
an
It can be
acre
300
CRP
plus, but they're focused in, like crep and or specialized
Highly
areas.
erosive
So
ground.
also go out west where, somebody's got 50,000 acres at $3 an acre. And then there's acreage caps set nationwide. And that's because they don't want to, they got to cap those acres.
Right.
So you get bad springs with no grass. And what did the deer hunting? It changed too, because those whole fields of CRP.
Oh man, the deer like that now.
They get in there, and you can't get them out unless you're right.
Negative or positive?
Oh,
Positive.
You could.
I had farms that were all CRP, and I felt they were better.
Hunter Grass Waterway was the only spot in the whole thing.
They were better CRP than they were in crops.
Right.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I wanted to finish with saying, Gary, I always play devil advocate. I don't know if anybody truly knows my thoughts on anything I ask, because I always want to ask the questions from a perspective of what I see or what I hear, and I want to get both sides, so I love the conversation. And I also want to say that I really appreciate you coming on. I think that was fantastic. I think you're a wealth of information. We got to have you on again.
I like that.
We want to have you on again.
It was great.
It was unbelievable. We also want to say that I don't think we said one cuss word the entire time, Grandma Betty.
I don't think I did. I tried very hard not to, per my daughters.
My Grandma Betty.
I heard a couple.
Huh?
There's a couple
Did you?
cuss words, but there was no F-bombs.
There's no F-bombs? Grandma Betty, we're doing better.
Man, yes.
Love my Grandma
No,
Betty. I'll do anything
my
for my
kids
grandma.
told me I had to put in $1 for every F-bomb for a vacation fund.
Vacation fund.
On the podcast?
That's what they said.
Were we cussing that much?
I mean, it must have been
I
like if
gotta
they thought
say,
$100 per
episode
podcast.
1, that was the first thing but I didn't want to hurt Joel's feelings when I texted
No,
him.
we need to hear
I
that.
I entertained. I said, hey, I liked it. I was entertained. I enjoyed it. There's so many ways to go with this thing.
I mean, one every now
Yeah.
and then kind
Were
of.
we more than one
emphasizes
every now and
stuff
again?
That, I mean, I
just
try
go back
not
and
to.
go back and watch it.
I don't like
and
to
see.
watch them.
I don't
I
either.
don't. I like to edit them and never watch them again because I don't want to listen to
Well,
myself.
and I probably won't watch this one because I'll be
Well,
I'll be second guessing
I was
everything
gonna.
I said.
I was gonna send it to you and have you watch it
well,
before I post it.
I probably will,
Yeah.
but no.
Here's
you know,
I mean,
I
was
think
it?
what can
Was,
help?
Here's another.
my
here's-
God, was it that
here's-
bad, guys?
Here's another question I have. So, I'm like real excited as it gets to hunting season.
Yeah.
And is it possible are we able to do this live?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So how exciting will it be like on Wednesday or Thursday of deer camps if we do like live as we're rolling in and we can recap hunts and recap do you know how excited?
we'll have to figure out delays. We'll have to, and I just don't want anybody to say something that's,
Yeah.
but like
So in other words, we could be like the Janet Jackson boob thing. We need like a little bit of a delay.
You could drop it that same day.
because like Twitch and stuff, we can do Twitch, we can do, I think, YouTube live, but we gotta, hopefully there's a way to create a delay because somebody says something, Chris better be fast
But
on the trigger.
how awesome
It's gonna
will
be
it
awesome.
be to be like live deer
Oh,
camps?
Dude, it's going to be, I think even just recorded deer camps are going to be great,
It
but I
will
think
be.
live would be better.
Even if it's like 1 week behind and you just do
Sure.
deer camp, deer camp, deer camp.
But
But obviously, I've lived and breathed natural resources even from the time we were kids. I can't measure my success with heads on my wall, but everybody
man,
walks
you're,
walks their own path, and I'm trying.
well, Joel kills a shit, or has
Yeah.
killed a shit ton of big deer.
Well, yeah,
So Gary, what I want though is I'm hoping if I send this to you, and I know you're gonna watch it. Maybe it's hard to watch yourself when you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you that right now. It's hard to watch yourself because I think I look like a freaking ding dong. But write down questions or write down comments because we want to have you back. We want to do this again and things you want to clarify, things you want to talk about.
Yeah, and there's a lot of topics, and I'm waiting for someone to contact you and challenge and say, that guy, he's full of a load of it. I want to hear about that because I love to argue.
This is going to be, this is by far going to be the most, when we post this podcast, mark my words.
This will be good.
People will comment, they will be hateful, they're going to be positive, they're going to be, but like we are trying to give you information.
Probably toward me more so.
No,
than
I don't think so. I think people are sometimes
It's a controversial topic.
Because I get on, I get on Ohio Deer Hunters pages and stuff, and and it's hard. You just see people hating,
Well, one thing
ridiculous.
I will say is I want people to comment and be respectful and ask questions because I have been reading questions. I even texted Joel about a couple questions. I am going to bring the questions up on the podcast. Just be respectful, be pleasant, and we can talk about anything. We can talk about anything.
You're talking about another myth. I got to say this.
Say it.
Okay. In today's age of declining sportsmen and the fact that we're having trouble managing deer herds from a pure perspective of numbers, the whole, crossbows should be unlawful, crossbows should be their own season. You're not a real man if you use a crossbow. I mean, crossbow's been used in Ohio since I think 1973.
I think so.
Somewhere in there. They're a tool. They're an implement. Okay? Just because I have a crossbow that I can shoot 75 yards with maybe doesn't mean I have to or that I would. And I got to have one of these guys to shoot at. If it's not there, crossbow doesn't kill deer. Crossbow doesn't kill deer. And, Joel kills the deer and Tim Woods killed the deer for their clients. They're the trigger man. What I can't figure out is why the heck have I not been the trigger man yet after all these years? But, that's my point. Is quit hating on each other.
Well,
Get out
I've
there
always,
and hunt.
so I did have a question. You guys were talking about you guys were talking about the 80s. I hope this isn't a silly question, but like that was all longbow at that point?
No,
I mean,
No, crossbow's been in
Yeah.
since.
Well,
the
no,
19
not crossbow.
And compound
sorry,
bows.
Sorry,
No, compound
sorry.
bows. I got a
compound. That's my question. Let me finish my question real quick.
Yeah.
My question was there compound bows and crossbows in the 80s?
Yeah.
Early 80s? Okay, I assumed. Now, was the crossbow allowed at that time?
Yes.
Okay. See, I didn't know.
We're one of the founders in the country in crossbow.
I can remember, as a real little kid, Dad shot a recurve.
And was it because of Horton?
And
is there a difference between
maybe.
a recurve and a longbow?
Yeah, it's the
Yes.
shape of the limbs. But
Yes.
my point is, he did not have a wheel bow. I think he bought Bear Whitetail.
The Bear
Hunter.
Whitetail was one of the first.
They were heavy aluminum. I think
all
got
these
them. They
steel
sold
cables.
them at J.C. Penney's for like $75, but that was a ton of money. I got one for Christmas, and man, I was on fire. This is awesome.
I was on fire.
Bear Whitetail.
I took it with me to college, and one of my new roommates was like, "What are you?" I got a PSE with an overdraw, blah blah blah, and I'm like, "What's that?" And I just took my bow because I was ashamed and put it in the closet.
That was pretty much after that. After
Yeah,
the
and
Bear
then it
Whitetail
just blew
became
up.
Pete Shepley, PSE.
Yeah, and then so Dad hurt himself, and one year for Father's Day, it would have been like 1986, 87. I went to Wamas's Sporting Goods, was still open, and said, "Hey, Dad says he's going to quit going bow hunting, just going to gun hunt." So I found a crossbow. I used my own money.
Was it a Horton?
It was not. It was, I don't even know what the brand was. It
Had
was
to be Barnett or
But
Horton.
here's the deal I'll get to. 2 of them blew up while we were trying, and Shelly's like, "Here's your," and so I bought a PSE Foxfire for him,
That was a crossbow.
which was a crossbow that shot a knocked long arrow, and it was a Pete Shepley PSE Foxfire.
Yep.
It was what I killed my first buck hunting with you. And you probably don't remember this, but I'd had surgery on my right hand, and I shot my first buck left-handed with Dad's PSE Foxfire that I bought. And I had spilt the whole bottle of Red Fox or urine all over my shoes or whatever. And if you remember where you were actually, you always remember, Joel was standing in a fork of a tree. There wasn't even a board in a fence row,
Sounds about right.
a couple of 100 yards from me. You had a compound bow. That deer dogged where I walked through that fence right to the wooden 2x4 ladder stand, and I shot it straight down left-handed because I couldn't pull the trigger with my right hand. I can remember stuff you don't want me to tell you. I remember.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Hey, great episode.
Hey, yeah,
fantastic.
it's been good.
I
Enjoyed it.
appreciate you both. Gary, we're going to have you back on.
I hope
that
so.
was awesome.
I hope so.
Thank you so much for your time, and everybody stay cool.
Episode